Chapter 167. After packing up, Aman went to the temple of Batet in the manor. After tidying up, Aman went to the shrine of Batet in the manor. So many things had happened, and he had guessed all kinds of possibilities in his mind. He wanted to find the cat that was once a god and ask it, hoping that Schrödinger could say something this time. Schrödinger's position in Aman's territory was absolutely transcendent. Everyone knew that the Supreme General doted on it. Aman had once put the king of Hittite aside and let the cat eat and drink first. Now, the cat could even jump on the altar and swagger around to enjoy the offerings. The people of Igut loved cats, and the Supreme General was even more of an Igut than the people of Igut. Aman didn't know where Schrödinger went to play all day. If he wanted to find it, he could wait in the temple. No matter how long he waited, he would not be impatient. Some time ago, Aman went to Montefiore to attend the ceremony. Schrödinger stayed comfortably in the territory and didn't go with him. He hadn't seen it for a few days and missed the cat. Aman waited from noon until dusk. He didn't even eat dinner and told the servants not to disturb him. When the sky was completely dark, Schrödinger was seen strolling over the threshold of the temple. Aman went up to him and smiled. "I've been waiting for you for a long time. Why are you only now back? Don't go out to play and delay your meal. The roasted fish is cold." Schrödinger squatted by the threshold and twisted his neck. The voice in Aman's mind was a little unhappy. "Why is it roasted and not roasted fish?" Aman apologized. "I was in a hurry and didn't have time to catch fish in the river. It's a little cold. I'll roast it again." Schrödinger asked, "You had time to wait for me all afternoon, but you didn't have time to catch a fish? You came back yesterday, but you didn't come to me until today." Was the cat acting coquettishly or angry? Aman smiled apologetically and said, "Many things have happened recently. Yesterday, I just came back from Mount Horeb, and Poera came looking for me. Then, I sent John to look for Madanzo and Link. There are still many things to deal with, and I just finished this morning. There's something I want to ask you, but I don't know when you'll be back, so I've been waiting here. If I find out next time, I'll go catch some fish first before looking for you." Schrödinger snorted. "Oh, so the Supreme General has something to do. Otherwise, why would he think of me, the cat?" Aman still smiled and said, "Didn't I come to you when I was free? Who was the one who built this temple? Now that the wings of the statues of Horus in the main shrines of the cities of Igut have been broken and damaged, of course I have to ask you for advice." Schrödinger suddenly sighed. "I know all this. Aman, I want to ask you, is it worth it to pay so much just for a promise? If you continue like this, I don't know how much more you will have to pay." She was, of course, referring to the efforts that Aman had made in order to let his people return to their homeland. Aman was just the son of an old drunkard in Duk, and he was exiled to the mountains. Moses and the others did not owe him much. Up to this point, Aman had already done too much, and no one could say that he owed anything. Aman smiled and said, "This is not only my promise to Goddess Murin, but also to Mayor Dusty in the underworld. If I can't even keep a promise, how can I achieve what I have today? I did pay a lot, but I also got everything I deserve." Schrödinger nodded silently and asked again, "Some people in the world often do things because they have paid too much and can't give up. Aman, don't tell me you also have this idea of self-restraint? In the eyes of the gods, time is like the flowing Nile River. People live in the present, where everything they have paid has been paid. They only need to think about how much more they have to pay and what they can get. This is true wisdom." Aman shook his head and said, "I am not a god, at least not now. I have never thought about what you said. I am just keeping my promise, and I have my own gains." Schrödinger finally smiled. "You are indeed my Aman. Only such a heart can help me unlock the seal. I don't know how long it will take you and how much effort you will put in. What do you want from me? Just say it." The cat stood up and walked to Aman's feet, rubbing against him intimately. Aman squatted down and sat on the ground. He stroked the cat's back and said, "The first is good news. I have passed the test, regained my strength, and have achieved the 8th level." Schrödinger was surprised and happy. "Really? Tell me about your situation." Amon told him how he felt. Schrödinger said, "Congratulations, you have indeed passed the test, but there is still a process to achieve the 8th level. The path to the gods is different from other cultivation methods in the human world. The real difference begins now. You have gone through 2 tests at the same time. First, you have not lost yourself after losing your power. Second, you have been reborn and your understanding of power has changed. You can slowly experience the second test. When you really achieve the 8th level of the so-called power of 2 sides, you can try to help me unlock the seal. I am glad that the first thing you talk about is not the gods, but me." Amon then asked, "The wings of the statues of Horus in the main shrines of the cities all over the country have been broken. What does this mean?" Schrödinger's tone was indistinguishable from joy or sorrow. The wings of the divine eagle symbolize the protection of Igut. Someone has torn off its wings, which, of course, means that Horus has lost his position as the king of the gods in the Ennead. I don't know what happened to him, but in short, he has become a loser. Amon asked again, "Igut has changed the name of the new pharaoh to Merneptah, and is going to build a shrine and a new capital for Enare. What does this mean?" Schrödinger thought for a moment before replying, "On the surface, Enare has become the king of gods again, but I think Seth should be the real winner. In the name of Enare, he has retaken the divine realm. As for what exactly is going on, I don't know." "Amon, even you don't know?" Schrödinger smiled bitterly. "I have been imprisoned for 100 years, and I don't know much about recent events between the gods." "Amon, then you should know what happened back then. Igut is the most powerful empire on the continent, and Horus, who owns this divine realm, should also be the most powerful god. Who could defeat him?" Schrödinger snorted coldly. "Horus is not the most powerful god in Igut, there is no place for him among the Ennead. If he had not become the king of the gods and enjoyed such a vast divine realm, Horus would probably not be a match for any of the Ennead." Amon frowned. "Then how could he have become the king of gods?" Schrödinger sighed. "It's because of Isis. She and Enare are the 2 most powerful gods among the Ennead, and it is said that Isis defeated Enare. Amon, then why didn't Isis become the king of gods?" Schrödinger narrowed his eyes, as if caught up in his memories. "That was a long time ago, thousands of years before I entered the Ennead. I can't know the specific situation, I've never even met Enare, and only vaguely heard the gods mention that Enare may not have really lost to Isis, he just gave up." Amon's eyes also narrowed. "Gave up?" Schrödinger nodded. "Yes, he gave up the divine realm that absorbs divine power and gave up his position as the king of gods. The gods do not do inexplicable things. It is said that this giving up is also a kind of detachment, the pursuit of another realm, and being defeated by Isis is also an opportunity for enlightenment. These are just rumors among the gods, I don't know if they are true or false, and they are beyond my understanding." Amon smiled bitterly. "If even you can't understand, then I'm afraid it doesn't make much sense for me to ask these questions now." Schrödinger, "Yes, it doesn't make sense for you to talk about these things when you're not in that position. I don't know how Isis defeated Enare, but one thing is clear to all the gods. There was an agreement between Enare and Isis that Isis herself could not become the god of the gods. But Isis was very clever, and she made her husband, Osiris, the king of the Ennead. Apart from Isis and Enare, the god who contributed the most to the development of the divine realm was Seth. Seth, of course, refused to accept it, so he defeated Osiris and seized the throne, and Isis helped Horus defeat Seth, and that was the so-called king of Igut in later generations." Amon blinked and said, "Oh, so that's what happened. It seems that Isis is very trustworthy, helping her husband and son become the king of the divine realm, and she herself has always kept the agreement with Anar, Schrödinger. There are no gods in this world who do not keep their promises, otherwise they would not have become gods." Amon frowned. "But this still doesn't explain my doubts. Since Isis is so powerful, and Horus has been the king of the Ennead for thousands of years, how could such a change happen today? Schrödinger, Horus has the status of the king of gods, of course he is more powerful, and with the support of Isis, other gods cannot shake him. My guess is the same as yours. Enkidu's sword on the battlefield let people see that Horus is not as powerful as they thought. Maybe because he took the initiative to appear on the battlefield and violated the agreement between the divine clans, he was attacked by the Anunnaki divine clan, and was either injured or killed, and Seth took the opportunity to defeat him. Amon shook his head and said, but I still don't understand, since Horus could not have achieved the position of the king of gods with his own strength, and all this was because of the help of Isis, then didn't Isis help him again? Schrödinger was silent and lowered his head for a long time. Amon waited for a long time before asking, what's wrong with you, what are you thinking about? The cat sighed. I have been imprisoned for too long and missed too many things. I'm afraid that Isis is no longer here. I should have thought of this long ago. Otherwise, how could Bear steal the rib of Osiris from the shrine, and how could he leave Montefiore with the guardian goddess? If Isis was still here, these things would not have happened. Amon was shocked. What? Isis is no longer here. What does this mean? Has she fallen? Schrödinger was silent again, as if lost in deep thought. The cat frowned and replied after a while, it may be that she has fallen, or it may be something else. The magic of Isis is beyond my understanding. Now that I think about it, when Bear entered the shrine, Isis should have been gone. As for where she went, I can't answer. Amon's tone was a little incredulous. It has been 36 years since Bear stole the rib and took away the guardian goddess. According to your guess, Isis was already gone at that time. Why did this happen only today? Schrödinger sighed again and again. 36 years may be a long time for mortals, but it is very short for the gods. Although Isis is no longer here, Horus has the status of the king of gods in a vast divine realm, which adds to his power, and the gods do not know how powerful he is. He may have been injured in the battle with the Anunnaki, giving Seth the opportunity to challenge him. Without the protection of Isis, Horus, who has lost his position as king of gods, would never have had a chance to take it back. Amon asked another question that was very interesting. I know that the relationship between the gods is not the kinship that people understand. So is Horus really the son of Isis? The ancient book you showed me described a very bizarre story. Is it true that Isis became pregnant next to the body of Osiris and gave birth to Horus? Schrödinger smiled. You have to join a certain divine clan to fully understand the relationship between the gods. But Horus should be the son of Isis. When he first appeared, the gods once suspected that Horus was the reincarnation of Osiris, but later it became clear that he was not. Osiris did not leave, and he is still the god of the underworld of the Ennead. It is said that Horus was the son of Isis before she became a god. He had been hiding on earth, and it was Isis who guided him to become a real god. It was only after Seth defeated Osiris that Horus officially appeared. It was rare that Schrödinger was willing to speak so much today, as if he wanted to pour out all the past. Amon took the opportunity to ask, I have never understood a few questions. What is a divine realm, and what is a divine clan? Schrödinger turned his head to look at him and said, according to your so-called power of two sides, you can only fully understand this after achieving the 9th level. But before that, you have to help me unlock the seal, so I will try to explain it clearly. The so-called divine clan was an ancient system of relationships. The earliest gods mastered the secret of becoming a god, which was the language mentioned in the ancient poems. They would guide some people on this path, and these people may be liked by the gods, or may be chosen by the gods, including the relatives and friends of the gods, and also those who were strong in the mortal world. This was similar to a teacher-student relationship, but not entirely so. The gods of the previous generation were the guides, and only those who received guidance were eligible to join a certain divine clan and abide by the rules of this divine clan, thus becoming a group of gods. The Ennead and the Anunnaki divine clans were formed in this way. Knowing how to become a god did not mean that one could become a god. For example, the power of two sides that Amon practiced was not something that everyone could master, and even if they did, it was difficult to pass various tests, and most people could not reach the end. The gods would not guide and teach for no reason. Instead, they would only choose those who were most likely to succeed. As for the divine realm, there were two meanings. One was a kingdom where people who believed in a certain divine clan lived, and such a kingdom was often created by the gods. For example, Osiris and Seth created the empire of Igut. The other meaning was difficult for mortals to understand, and it was also known as the realm of the source of divine power. It was difficult to clearly describe this concept in words, and usually it was where the shrine of a certain god was located, where the god received the offerings and prayers of his people. There might be many gods worshipped in a temple, but the gods had to attach their consciousness and thoughts to the statues. Only then would the statues symbolize the true gods. When each statue was completed, the priests needed to hold a ceremony to pray and offer sacrifices, asking for the gods' blessing. Amon had experienced this firsthand in many shrines, and the gazes of the gods were invisible, as if they could hear the hearts of people praying. Because of this, Amon forbade his disciples from praying to other gods. On the other hand, it was only through such a ceremony that the gods could turn the statue into an attached embodiment of their consciousness and mind, and the cold stone statue also seemed to have a strange life. The divine realm had an exclusive quality, and if a god also wanted to attach his consciousness and mind to his own statue, he must obtain the consent of the main god of the divine clan, which was also one of the agreements between the gods. This was divided into two situations. One was to enjoy the sacrifices of people in the same shrine and become a sub-god beside the main god, the other was to open up a separate small divine realm in the vast divine realm. This second situation was equivalent to the shrine of Murin in Duk or the temple of Isis in Montefiore. The main god of the Ennead was Horus, and because of the special status of the goddess Isis, the city of Montefiore, which had the largest population and the most abundant resources in the lower Igut, had always been the realm of Isis. The situation of Murin was completely different from that of Isis. Duk was the battlefield of the ancient gods, a land abandoned and cursed by the gods. When the Anunnaki divine clan split, according to the agreement, it was included in the scope of Enlil's divine realm, but in fact, it did not become a real, divine realm. Without people who believed in and sacrificed to the gods, there was no divine realm to speak of. The vicinity of Duk was barren and not suitable for people to live and reproduce at all. Later, the goddess Murin asked Enlil to establish her own divine realm in the land of Marduk, and Enlil agreed and made a certain agreement with the goddess Murin. The agreement between the gods was confidential, and only they knew about it, and Schrödinger could not know the specific content. Chapter 168. 152, The realm of the source of divine power. To make the land of Marduk a true realm of the source of divine power, Murin had to complete everything herself. This was very much like how Pharaoh gave Amon a piece of land in the plains of Duk, but it was only a piece of paper, and Amon still had to occupy and reclaim it himself. Murin requested that the sinners of the Battle of the Gods be moved to the land of Marduk. These people originally believed in the gods of the defeated side and were the ancestors of the Duk miners. They were punished to mine parangons in an extremely desolate and difficult environment, and their survival and reproduction faced great challenges. Only those with the strongest blood could survive, but they were still in danger of extinction. At this time, Murin performed a miracle, taught them the skills of Duk mining, and gave them the oracle of the patron god, so that they could survive in this dangerous land of Marduk for generations. Because these people were the descendants of the sinners, according to the oldest oracle of Anunnaki, they were not allowed to leave the land of Marduk. This ancient oracle was passed down from generation to generation, and later became the law of the Hittite kingdom, but few people knew its origin. This law had been enforced by the dynasties for hundreds of years, and there was a very practical reason. The people of Duk were the best craftsmen on the continent, and Duk was such an important producer of parangons, and later became a producer of iron ore. If these miners left Duk, it would be a loss for any kingdom, unless Duk no longer existed. If there were no laws and regulations, who would want to live in such a difficult environment for generations? As for what happened later, there was no need for Schrödinger to describe it, Amon himself knew it very well. The people of Duk betrayed the oracle and lost the protection of Murin, and Enril launched a flood to destroy the place, turning the plains of Duk into 1,000 miles of fertile land. In the ancient prophecy, the true god of the gods would be born here, and perhaps Enril thought that the time had come. As for the realm of the source of divine power, what did it mean? The believers claimed to be the servants of the gods. Their beliefs, sacrifices, and prayers were the source of the gods' power. This power was different from ordinary magic and body arts. It was a kind of divine power that the gods possessed. Schrödinger had never possessed an independent divine realm of her own, so her understanding of divine power was not comprehensive. There were two main aspects to it. First, it could gather power to strengthen one's soul. It was like having many selves. When these countless selves were gathered together, one could understand the ultimate meaning of life in the world. Secondly, it could help the gods face the judgment of fate and judgment of the end of days. At this point, Amon couldn't help but ask, do the gods also have to face the judgment of fate and judgment of the end of days? Schrödinger's body trembled slightly. Whether it is body arts or magic, if one practices to the peak of the 9th level, they will have the power to fight against the gods in the mortal world. They are often called demigods, such as Gilgamesh and Enkidu. But the true demigods did not have this meaning in the beginning. They were people who were guided by the gods and had the potential to become gods. But in the eyes of the world, they were often gods, such as me in the past. If you achieve the 9th level of the power of two sides, you will be a true demigod in the ancient legends. You will be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the gods in many myths and even have a divine realm. But to truly achieve that realm of eternal life, the judgment of fate and judgment of the end of days are a test that must be passed. Do you know why the Ennead got its name? Amon blinked and said, isn't it because of the Ennead? Schrödinger, it is indeed because of the Ennead, but you don't know the real reason. Before Horus, only these 9 people became the true gods of eternal life, and Horus was the 10th and the last. The other gods, including me in the past, were only demigods. I was once only one step away, but in the end, I did not succeed. Amon went to participate in the blessing ceremony of Isis and stayed in Montefiore for a total of 7 or 8 days. He sent Madanzo back the day after arriving in Montefiore to let Moses and the others leave. It was a long journey, and although they had been prepared, it took time to pack everything up and leave. So when Amon returned to the territory, Moses and the others had only left a few days ago. More than 60 clansmen, more than 20 carriages, loaded with various supplies, including farming tools, clothing, food, seeds, tents, living utensils, and so on. They were going to reclaim the wilderness and rebuild their hometown, and it was the most important migration after ending their bitter fate. Naturally, they had to bring as much as possible of what they needed. Especially after leaving the territory of Igut, they had to cross thousands of miles of desert and hundreds of miles of swamps and jungles. Food, water, and self-defense weapons were indispensable, and more than 20 carriages were fully loaded. Such a team could not move very fast, and when the new pharaoh's orders spread to all parts of the country, they had just arrived at the city of Heliopolis, which was also the city closest to Montefiore on the east bank of the Nile River, and still far from the border of Igut. Moses was stopped at the city's checkpoint, and the officer guarding the checkpoint looked at the general's order and then told them, now that the new pharaoh has ascended the throne, according to the latest decree, you can no longer go. Fortunately, this place is not far from the city of Herak, please return to the territory immediately. If you continue to go forward in violation of the order, you will be arrested and forcibly repatriated. Moses had no choice but to order the caravan to turn around and head south. The clansmen's disappointment was indescribable. They had waited for 6 years, and who knew how much suffering they had gone through. Just as they saw a glimmer of hope, it was suddenly extinguished by a sudden change. That damned Pharaoh Lazith too, why did he have to die at this time? And now such a change had happened in the empire of Igut. Once the people who relied on faith fell into despair, the pain and hesitation were indescribable, and they did not even have the strength to walk. Moses comforted the clansmen, "We have already endured and waited for so long, why not continue to persevere? As long as God has not given up on us, there is no need to be disappointed." The clansmen asked Moses, "But where is God?" The 12 miners that Moses taught all said, "God is watching us, as long as we do not lose faith in our hearts, we can find our home." That night, they did not pass through any towns. They stopped at a place on the bank of the Nile River, sheltered from the wind, and spent the night in a tent. In the distance was the rushing water, and close by was the high mountains and dense forests. Moses ordered the 12 clansmen who had practiced the power of 2 sides to take turns to keep watch, while he sat in the carriage and meditated, calling Allah in his heart. "My God, the Savior of hope. I call to you, I beg you to hear my voice. Do not let the flame of hope be extinguished again. Guide my people back to their home, even if it means sacrificing my body, mind, and life, as long as they return to the land of Duk. God, I am your servant, please help me." At this moment, Moses heard a voice in his mind, "God is watching you and your people, please come to the forest and accept the guidance of the flame of hope." Moses hurriedly opened his eyes and got out of the carriage. Without being discovered by the clansmen, he quietly sneaked into the forest by the roadside with his iron stick in hand. Sure enough, there was a faint flame in the distance. He passed through the trees and came to a valley. He saw a bush burning in the fire. When he got closer, he saw that the tree was intact. There were 2 people standing on the open ground. He hurriedly knelt down and saluted, "Messenger of God, Moses is summoned." One of the messengers said, "Moses, there is a new situation now. The pharaohs of Egypt will not allow you to leave. If you stay, you may never have the chance to return to your home. Do you choose to go back or to move forward?" Moses replied, "If God can guide the way, of course I choose to move forward and return to my home." The other messenger asked again, "This road is very difficult, and it will be even more difficult to lead so many people. You have a chance to go by yourself. God allows you to choose." Moses pursed his lips and said, "No, if I wanted to leave alone, I could have done so long ago. God told me to guide my people back to their home. Even if I can't set foot on the land of Duk with all my efforts, I have to help my people fulfill their wishes." The messenger nodded, "Very good, you really did not let God down. Give me your stick, let me teach you how to do it." Moses passed the iron staff to the oracle. Link turned around and took out the ventusle of the wind that was embedded inside and replaced it with the one that was used to forge a spatial magic tool. Then he turned back and handed the stick to Moses, "I will teach you how to use it. You can only move forward by relying on this stick. The messenger of God will guide the way ahead and erase your traces behind." Moses stayed in the forest for most of the night, and only quietly returned when it was almost dawn. At dawn, he gathered everyone and said, "Last night, God summoned me. He told us that we cannot return to Amon's territory, or we will never have the chance to return home. From today onwards, we will walk in the deep mountains and wilderness, avoiding all the checkpoints and tracking, and walk back to our home on foot. God is watching us, and he will also guide the way." The worried clansmen were pleasantly surprised when they heard this, and there was a lot of discussion. To walk thousands of miles in the wilderness, they had to avoid the official roads. If they lost their caravans and supplies, how could they cross thousands of miles of deserts and swamps? This was tantamount to becoming a fugitive slave. They would be hunted in Egypt, and no one knew how many dangers they would face. It was almost an impossible task. Moses waited until everyone was almost done talking, then asked, "God is testing our faith. Whoever is willing to be an eternal slave of Pharaoh, to build the shrine and the mausoleum, can go back now. Clansmen, who among you is willing to embark on the road home and follow me into the mountains?" The 12 strength clansmen stood up and said, "We are willing to embark on this road. God has given us power and light to guide us." Moses nodded with relief and said, "God has given you a title, called judges. From today onwards, you are the 12 judges of the Dushians. You will lead your clansmen to sacrifice to God and strengthen the power in your hearts. Another person stood up and asked, "But God did not give us power, Moses, can you guarantee that God will always protect us on our way home?" Moses leaned on his cane and said, "No one can guarantee in the name of God. This is just the promise of God to our people, to provide selfless guidance and help. Power belongs to you, faith makes you stronger, hope is in your heart, and the road is under your feet." In the end, all the clansmen followed Moses, abandoned the carriage and entered the dense forest in the mountains. Although some of them were hesitant in their hearts, they did not dare to go back alone since so many of their clansmen had made the same choice. Moses walked through the valley where he met the oracle yesterday, through the bushes that had been burning with fire, and entered a narrow path in the mountains on the east bank of the Nile River. He did not know that the valley was the place where Ammon had been hunted, and the path that the oracle had guided them to take was the road that Ammon had used to escape from the hunters to Montefiore in the wilderness. Now Ammon let his clansmen leave along this road, except for a few places where they had to bypass cities and towns. Most of the rest of the road was traveled by Ammon himself, so they could avoid human habitation and the patrols of the city guards. The carriages were abandoned on the side of the road, but the clansmen still led the oxen, horses, and donkeys. These animals had grass to eat on the road, and if necessary, they could be slaughtered for food, because they had almost no chance to go to the cities to buy supplies. More than 60 clansmen, most of whom were strong young miners, unloaded as much as they could from the carriages, and let the animals carry them on their backs, making their way through the wilderness with difficulty. Walking like this would affect their speed, but Moses did not stop his clansmen from carrying the animals and supplies. After all, no one could walk such a long distance empty-handed. Although God had given him a magical cane, he had instructed him in advance that it was best not to use it. The 12 judges were the strongest supporters of returning home. Their names were Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, Deborah, Gideon, Tola, Jair, Jephthah, Ibzan, Elon, Abdon, and Samson. Moses' servant, Joshua, asked along the way, "Once we leave, we'll become fugitive slaves. We can't buy things in the cities, so we can only rely on the supplies we brought with us. Not to mention, we have to cross the desert. Do we need a unified plan?" Moses nodded and said, "Then you'll be responsible for the registration, unified management, and distribution of supplies. If we use our food sparingly and don't delay our journey, it should be just enough. We just need to bring enough water before we enter the desert." Joshua accepted the order and made a count of the livestock and food the clansmen brought with them. He also calculated the amount of food they had to consume each day, and distributed them at a fixed time. There were not many mountains around the city of Heliopolis, but there were undulating wilderness and dense forests far away from the Nile Valley. As long as they avoided the inhabited villages and cities, almost no one would notice them. Madanzo drove the crystal shuttle in front of them as a lookout, while Link held the Sphinx and the shadow-chasing lamp and quietly followed behind the group, erasing the traces of the large group. Link was the tribe leader of the savages, so he was good at traversing the wilderness and tracking prey since he was young. Naturally, he was the best at this. John returned to the territory and reported to Ammon that Moses and the other clansmen had abandoned the carriages and left through the small paths. Ammon nodded and thanked them for their hard work, then instructed John to continue patrolling the territory every day as usual. Technically, there was no longer any need for Ammon to stay in Egypt, and he could leave at any time. However, he had been staying in his territory, behaving like a law-abiding and honest supreme general of the empire. Instead, Schrödinger was the first to lose his cool and took the initiative to ask Ammon, "Why aren't you leaving yet? Whether it's returning to the plains of Duk or escorting Moses in secret, it's better than staying here. Do you still want to stay in the empire of Igut and get promoted and make a fortune?" Ammon smiled bitterly. "You know why I'm not leaving, so why deliberately tease me?" Kitten puffed up her cheeks. "Is it because of her? You're worried about her, but you don't think about the fact that you might not be able to protect yourself." The her she mentioned was obviously referring to the guardian holy maiden of the temple of Isis, Maria. Ammon nodded and said, "Yes, of course it's because of her. According to you, the goddess Isis is long gone, and now that today's change has happened, Horus has lost his position as the king of the Ennead. I'm afraid the status of the temple of Isis will also be shaken. Kitten smiled. You're already the supreme general of the empire, you don't see the problem so simply, do you? The guardian holy maiden of Isis is just a symbol, and even if the pharaoh wants to worship the new king, he has to take into account the beliefs and habits of the people. Although the status of the temple of Isis has declined, why do you have to worry about Maria? Do you think that Maria has nothing but the identity of the guardian holy maiden of Isis? Schrodinger's words were very reasonable. The guardian holy maiden of the temple of Isis was a symbol of the theocracy of the empire. The main temple of the cities of Igut was the temple of Horus, but the main temple of Montefiore was the temple of Isis, and it had become the center of the theocracy of the whole lower Igut. The reasons were complicated. On the one hand, of course, it was because of the unique status of the goddess Isis, which was related to the realm of the gods. On the other hand, it was because the main territory of the Igut was divided into two prosperous areas, the upper and lower Igut. In the lower Igut, there must be a center that symbolized the theocracy and the royal rule. The existence of the guardian holy maiden of Isis had a dual background of history and reality. Even if the new pharaoh wanted to worship the new king, he still needed to consolidate the rule of the lower Igut. The status of the guardian holy maiden of Isis might be weakened, but the prestige of Maria herself in the lower Igut was already very stable. If she could adapt to the situation and knew how to cooperate, it would not be difficult for her to cope with the new changes. Amon even thought that Maria had the talent to be the prime minister of the empire. Even if she was not the guardian holy maiden of Isis, she was fully qualified and capable of becoming the new high priest of the empire. But Amon was still worried. What was he worried about? Thinking of this, he said to Schrödinger, "It is because of her, but not entirely because of her. I want to stay here and see what happens. It will be good for Moses and the others. At least I can get the latest decree in time and use my identity to provide protection. Another reason, of course, is because of you." Chapter 169. 153 The birth of a monotheistic religion. Amon replied, "I have experienced a brand new power, which is completely different from pure body arts and magic arts. It is like a newborn baby growing up, and the power is inseparable in the process of growth. This requires a stable environment to experience and nurture, and I'd better stay in the territory to train so that I can unlock the seal for you as soon as possible." Schrödinger, "In that case, I'm too embarrassed to urge you to do anything. The nurturing of power cannot be rushed, I'll stay here with you." If other factors were not taken into account, the best time for Amon to leave the empire of Igut was after Moses reached the plains of Duk. Based on the speed at which the clansmen walked through the wilderness, it would take at least half a year. Amon did his best to arrange everything, but he was not fearlessly anxious. Except for being a little worried about Maria's situation, the Supreme General was calm. According to Schrödinger, Amon's breakthrough to the 8th level of the power of two sides would be completely different from other training methods in the world, like a brand new beginning. Amon did not quite understand at first, but when he recovered the power of the bloodline in his body little by little, he realized what was going on. In the silence of the night, Amon closed his eyes and meditated as usual, but what he recovered was the power of the bloodline in his body, merging it with his magic power to grow together. A bow floated quietly in front of him. It was the divine bow that had once shocked the world. The bowstring was pulled silently, and an invisible arrow of energy condensed. But Amon did not shoot the arrow, otherwise the house would collapse. He was just demonstrating. Then the bowstring was put back, and the invisible arrow disappeared. The divine bow spun, as if caught by an invisible hand, and gently floated back to Amon's leg. Amon opened his eyes in the darkness and sighed. "So that's how it is. I should have known." He took out a dagger from thin air. It was one of the most common weapons in Amon's collection. It was the one Mayor Dusty gave him when he left Duk. The saber flew through the air like a fish, emitting a dazzling light. It slashed out a cross-shaped arc of light in the air, which then spun rapidly to form a circular shield. Next, the saber slashed out and quickly retracted, flying back into Amon's hand. He muttered to himself in the darkness, "This is the last sword attack that Enkidu used against me." However, that sword attack was much stronger. Before it could reach me, he had already died. Amon used to practice the power of two sides, but in truth, he was still just a warrior and a sorcerer at the same time. He could only use magic in combat or pick up a weapon at the same time while casting magic. But at this moment, the situation had changed. Starting from the simplest first achievement, how to directly practice the power of one side, without the concept of magic or body arts, but only according to the individual's talent. His path of practice was finally clear. The understanding was subversive, and even overturned all previous conclusions. It was a kind of negation. He also found one thing: to awaken this power was much more difficult than to awaken the power of magic and body arts, and even more difficult than to awaken the power of two sides of one body. Who could awaken this power? There was one situation that did not need to be judged, and that was those who had already achieved high achievements. Whether it was a supreme mage or a supreme warrior, they had this aptitude to achieve what they had already achieved. It was nothing more than the difference in the path they had taken. To re-embark on this path, one only needed to understand and confirm and complete the missing practice. Crazy Ol could also embark on this path. Although he still had to pass all kinds of tests and there was almost no hope of success, at least he could understand the goal he had been pursuing all his life. Amon thought of Goliath again. Goliath once said that he and Enkidu were separately trying two other paths, and Amon was confirming the power of two sides of one body. Perhaps they could both solve the secret of becoming gods. This was not entirely unreasonable. The path explored by Crazy Ol, Bear and Amon could be said to be unique. They were constantly approaching the secret of becoming gods, and today they finally understood the origin. In the darkness, Amon forgot the outside world, even his own existence. But tears silently welled up in his eyes. He silently prayed to Nietzsche and Bear, with gratitude and blessings. The hard work of 3 generations of geniuses and the summary of research on the basis of the experience of countless geniuses had finally solved the mystery, and the answer had always existed in the world. In the following days, Supreme General Amon closed himself off from visitors. Even the servants around him could not see him. Only John knew where he was. He lived in the village built by Moses and the others. He began to train his power again from the lowest level. It was not so much training, but rather experience and mastery, because he had already broken through to the next level. He only had one disciple, John, by his side, so he called John over and said, "I once taught you the mining skills of Duk and the most basic magic meditation. Because of this, you integrated the restless power and became a supreme warrior. Later, I taught you the power of two sides and let you practice magic and body arts separately. But today, I want to show you the real path. Abandon all prejudices and follow my instructions. Practice all the powers you have learned in this way." John was surprised and said, "Ammonius, are you going to awaken another power for me?" Schrödinger was also one of the gods belonging to the Ennead, and she had never even seen Ra. The ancient father of the gods had long since retired. The status of the gods in the Ennead had changed subtly, with Ra becoming the only supreme god, and the rest of the gods, regardless of age, were all under Seth, and Seth became the king of the Ennead. Not only that, but since the decree of Igut only recognized Ra as the only god, the gods of the other pantheons had also become false gods. The other gods in the Ennead, except for Ra, had also lost the title of gods and had changed their title. Amon had another way of thinking about this matter, and he even thought of his disciples calling him Ammonius, and Moses and others also seeing him as the only god, Allah. If one day he became a god beyond the realm of immortality, then his disciples who followed him on this path could also become gods, and this would be a new pantheon. So how to maintain the faith of this pantheon without the collapse of conflict like the Anunnaki pantheon or the Ennead pantheon? The decree of one god issued by Pharaoh Merneptah did provide a solution. This should not have been entirely thought up by Pharaoh out of thin air. He must have received the guidance of some oracle, and at the same time, there must be a very clear practical motive. If it really had something to do with the oracle, the gods would not do inexplicable things, so it must have symbolized something. Unfortunately, this was not something that Aman could understand at the moment, and even Schrödinger could not explain it. The new pharaoh succeeded the throne. In addition to issuing the oracle and the latest national decree, the first specific message turned out to be directed at the supreme general of the empire, Aman, who lived in seclusion in his fief. Aman inexplicably received another reward, and to the west of his existing territory, Pharaoh gave him another fief. This kind of reward did not make much sense. The empire of Igut had a vast territory, and many of the unirrigated wilderness was not suitable for people to live in, nor was it worth using a large population to develop. West of Aman's territory, beyond the river valley, was an uninhabited wilderness since ancient times, and beyond Mount Horeb was the desert. Chapter 170. 154. The River of Blood. Supreme General Aman originally had 5 titles, but now one was cut down to 4. The original first title, The Blessing of the Great God Horus, disappeared, and the other title, Inherit the Glory of Anare, was raised to the top and changed to Radiate the Glory of Anare. This change was natural, because Horus had not only lost his status as the king of Igut, but he also no longer had the title of a god, and Anare had become the only supreme god by law. The monotheistic reform of Merneptah first took the title of the famous supreme general of the empire, Aman, as a test and a declaration. Aman could not say anything more than thanks for the reward, and the ministers of Igut also knew the direction the empire was going. Although it was just a change in the title of the Supreme General, its practical role was very important. Aman's achievements and glory were obtained on the battlefield, and he enjoyed a high reputation among the people. There was also a rumor that it was because of the protection of Anare that the Anare Legion was able to achieve a miraculous victory on the battlefield. The defeat of the Horus Legion, the most elite force of the kingdom, naturally symbolized the injury and retirement of Horus. The legions of the empire were named after the gods, and naturally, there was another meaning. The soldiers believed that the name of the legion was the guardian god on the battlefield. While the Horus Legion lost the first battle and was almost wiped out, the Anare Legion, which had just been formed from a miscellaneous army, repeatedly made great contributions and saved the empire of Igut from the fate of defeat. Once this rumor was spread, the impact on the people was indeed considerable, and it was also adding fuel to the monotheistic reform of Merneptah Pharaoh. Even if the gods had a divine realm, to turn it into a true realm of divine power, they still needed true faith and offerings. The establishment of a monotheistic system required a corresponding social foundation, and only then could Seth enjoy the status of a true god in the name of Anare. After Aman wrote back to thank Pharaoh for the reward, Merneptah issued a series of new decrees requiring the city-states to replace the chief god worshipped in their shrines with Are. The other gods, including Horus, did not cancel the sacrifice, but they had to be ranked after Seth. At the same time, he built a magnificent shrine of Are in Hillmore and made Hillmore the new capital of the empire. Merneptah's monotheistic reform also had a very practical significance in the secular world of the empire of Igut, as it concentrated and strengthened the rule of the monarchy. After going through a war that mobilized the whole nation, the conflicts between the various factions within the empire became more and more obvious, especially the conflicts between the emerging nobles and the aristocrats that had existed for thousands of years. Lazith II's death was too sudden, and Merneptah's position after succeeding the throne was not stable. He was not the eldest son of Lazith II, but the luckiest of the princes, who ascended the throne with the support of powerful ministers. Much of the power of the empire of Igut was in the hands of the traditional aristocrats represented by the clergy groups, and Merneptah's reform was equivalent to centralization of power. There was a certain difference between the concept of the clergy groups and the concept of the mages. Supreme mages like Maria and George did not belong to this group, but the aristocracy that had risen in recent years. People like Rod Dick, although not a mage himself, were still the chief priest of the Cape States, holding local military and political power for generations. He was a typical representative of this group. For example, the Ramos family, from which Nero came, was also a member of the clergy groups, and Aman had a strong conflict with this family. If personal factors aside, this was also one of the inevitable contradictions caused by the rise of the new forces represented by Ammon. When the position of the royal power was unstable, it was easy for the power to be controlled by the local aristocratic groups. The change in the Ennead divine clan was an opportunity, and Merneptah took the opportunity to carry out the monotheistic reform, which was also a move to weaken the various conflicting forces in the country and strengthen the centralization of power. Changing his own name and establishing a new king were the most important symbols. Merneptah did not touch the temple of Isis in Montefiore for the time being, but according to the oracle and decree, the goddess Isis had also become an angel. Pharaoh gave this angel a special title of Our Lady of Isis, and also gave the original guardian of Isis, Saint Maria, a new title, Guardian of the Angels. The temple of Isis was still dedicated to the Our Lady of Isis, but the most important east and west halls on both sides of the main shrine were rebuilt. The east side, where the sun rose, was dedicated to Ra, while the west side was dedicated to the angels led by Seth. In fact, this was Seth's shrine, and the angels behind it were just a foil to him. As Ammon expected, he soon received a warrant from Pharaoh from the city of Herak, summoning the craftsmen of Duk to go to Hilmor to build the main shrine for Ra. Supreme General Ammon's first title was Glory to Ra, and he had no reason to refuse such a trivial matter. Otherwise, it would be disrespectful to the gods. Pharaoh ordered the cities to recruit craftsmen, and specifically mentioned the miners of Duk. If Lasith too had not died, and nothing had happened to the Ennead divine clan, after Ammon's rampage in Montefiore, most people would not deliberately find fault with him, unless there was conclusive evidence that the Supreme General had committed a serious crime. But now everything had changed, and the power structure of the empire was being reorganized. Prime Minister Joseph was the strongest supporter of the new pharaoh's monotheistic reform, and perhaps he was the one who told Pharaoh where the best craftsmen on the continent were. Even if the Prime Minister did not say it, Pharaoh himself would have made Ammon state his position, as this was both the will of the gods and the direction of the empire's national policy. Ammon said apologetically to the emissary of Herak, "I could not have predicted what would happen today. That group of craftsmen has been sent to the territory of the plains of Duk." The emissary said, "This is an order from Pharaoh, and it must be carried out. His Majesty has just awarded you a large territory, but it is only for the requisition of a few dozen slaves. This is the most important matter of the empire at present. Supreme General should recall those slaves immediately." Ammon nodded and said, "I will send my guards to recall them immediately." The emissary said, "Thank you, Supreme General, I will wait for news in your territory." John crossed the Nile River with a group of guards and chased Moses and the others along the official road. 2 days later, he returned and reported to Ammon with a terrified expression, "Supreme General, it's not good, your slaves have abandoned their carriages and escaped. We found their abandoned carriages on the official road by the river, as well as their footprints into the mountains and forests. The mountains are too desolate, we have searched all day but have not found them." Ammon slapped the table and said, "What, they dared to escape? Continue to search, when you find them, bring them directly to Herak." Then he said to the emissary, "I'm really sorry, those slaves have escaped, please report to Pharaoh truthfully. I am willing to donate a large sum of money to the empire for the construction of the shrine of Ra. Slaves escaped from time to time, and the facts were clear." Supreme General Ammon did not lie, he was also a victim, and Ammon's donation was not empty talk. He took out the equivalent of 1,000 parangons as a tribute, which was far more than the value of dozens of ordinary slaves. The emissary did not know the inside story and thought that he had completed his mission perfectly. Although the Supreme General's slave had escaped, he had paid 1,000 parangons for it. So, after comforting Ammon, he returned to the city of Herak and reported the situation to the capital. Unexpectedly, when Pharaoh saw the report, he attached great importance to it and immediately sent an order to reward Supreme General Ammon with 200 slaves in recognition of his generous donation to the shrine of Ra, and at the same time to compensate him for the loss of his slaves' escape. Pharaoh also ordered the city-states of the country to assist the Supreme General in recovering the escaped slaves, and specifically emphasized the importance of these craftsmen in the divine prophecy. Ammon frowned after receiving the order. Merneptah's move was unusual. It was not as simple as summoning craftsmen, but he wanted this group of people. He actually personally ordered the city-states all over the country for the sake of dozens of escaped slaves. But Pharaoh could not punish the Supreme General himself on the surface. Amon's slaves had escaped, and he had suffered losses, not to mention that he had donated a large sum of money. In the face of such kindness from the empire's pharaoh, Supreme General Amon was also very grateful and denounced John and the other incompetent personal guards in his territory. In anger, he dismissed John from his post as the captain of the guards and wanted to drive him back to Montefiore. John pleaded, "Supreme General, please give me a chance to redeem myself. Although you have dismissed me from my post as the captain of the guards, I still need to make up for my mistakes." Amon nodded and said, "John, you have nothing to do with me anymore. Since you have the desire to help me, for the sake of Pharaoh, I will give you a warrant. You will lead all my guards to search along the official road, even if you have to chase them out of the borders of Igut, you must find them." John prostrated and bowed, "Thank you, Supreme General. If I can't find them, I will definitely not come to see you." John was dismissed from his post by Amon, and in order to redeem himself, he asked the Supreme General to let him continue to lead his guards to search for the escaped slaves. This was all voluntary, and it looked like he was carrying out Pharaoh's orders. In fact, before this, Amon had privately asked John, "For the sake of dozens of escaped slaves, Pharaoh has issued an order to all the cities in the country. This is not an ordinary action. It seems that I will have to leave Igut sooner or later. After I leave, what will you do?" John replied without thinking, "Of course I will continue to follow Ammonius and bring Misfi with me to follow you." Amon smiled, "I'm afraid it will be difficult to leave when the time comes. I will give you two choices now. One is to dismiss you from your post as the captain of the guards, and you will no longer have anything to do with me. You can return to Montefiore and continue to be an unemployed general. The second choice is still to dismiss you from your post, but give you a chance to go to where I am going." "John, of course it is the second choice. To tell you the truth, all your guards have also sworn to follow you to the death. If you leave Igut, their fates will be very miserable. Supreme General, please consider it." Amon nodded, "You are very thoughtful, then I will let you take all of them and leave." Amon asked John to lead all his guards to chase after the escaped slaves along the official road. It was nothing more than giving them a chance to leave the borders of Igut and head to the plains of Duk. Supreme General Amon had really dismissed all the people around him. His clansmen had all fled, Madanzo and Link had also left, and now even John had left. He did not even leave a single guard behind. He only had the servants of the territory by his side, which was equivalent to living alone in such a huge and unfamiliar territory, but he seemed very calm. Amon had thought it through very clearly. If Pharaoh really wanted to harm him, he could leave at any time, but the people around him would definitely be implicated, so it was better to prepare early. He was now a supreme general without an army, with only a cat by his side to keep him company. Amon did not want to take the initiative to commit treason. If he was convicted of this crime, too many people would be implicated, including his former subordinates and the lords who had recommended him. Moreover, after John left, Amon had already begun to undo the seal on Schrödinger, and there was no time or energy to deal with other things. But the importance that the pharaohs of Igut attached to the pursuit of the Dushians was far beyond ordinary people's expectations. Behind Pharaoh's orders, there was even the shadow of the gods. Moses led his clansmen along the barren mountains on the east bank of the Nile River, through the inaccessible dense forest, from the city of Heliot to the territory of the city of Bubas. Here, the official road turned east, and they had to cross the official road into another mountainous area to avoid being tracked. Moses led his clansmen to hide in the mountains, wanting to wait until late at night when the official road was deserted. However, at night he heard the voice of the oracle again. Madanzo told him that they could not leave at night, and that they had to wait until dawn. Sure enough, that night, several groups of the city guards passed by on the official road with torches in their hands. If they saw Moses and the others, they would not be able to escape. At dawn, Moses heard Madanzo's voice again, "You can go now." Moses woke up his sleeping clansmen, quietly went to the official road, and walked along the main road for a distance. This place was far from the town, and the nearby farms were still in deep sleep. There was a cloud in the sky that always hid them. They took the risk to walk through this densely populated open area, and entered another desolate mountainous area. Finally, they breathed a sigh of relief. They had been trudging through the hills full of bushes for several days, and in many places they had to cut down thorns to make a path. Everyone was carrying heavy loads, and even the strongest miners were tired. In the afternoon, they came to a river, a tributary of the Nile River, and an important water source for irrigating the land near the city of Bubas. Moses ordered everyone to stop and rest, and took out utensils to make a fire to cook. They set up a stove and gathered firewood. Moses ordered 6 of the 12 judges to perform magic to prevent the smoke from the fire from rising, so as not to be discovered. As soon as the fire was lit, the clansmen sent to fetch water from the river stumbled back and reported, "Oh no, there was a terrible miracle, the river has turned into blood." Chapter 171. 155. God's punishment. Moses said with a sullen face, "It is because of the guidance of God that we can safely pass through the dangerous area and arrive here. If a changed river can shake our faith, how can we be worthy of God's help? How can we go through all the hardships to return to our homeland?" No one dared to drink the river. Moses raised his iron staff and used water elemental magic to condense the dew on the grass. He ordered his people to continue cooking. While they were cooking, Medanzo and Link hid in a secluded place and whispered. Link said, "Did you see that? Someone used a very clever sensory reversal spell to change the color and smell of the river to scare Moses and his people away." Medanzo frowned and said, "If they don't cross the river, they will have to go back to the main road and go from the east. They will definitely be discovered. This is the purpose of the person who did this. Who could it be?" Link stroked his staff and said, "Ammonius sent John and his guards to leave Igut first. When John passed by, he passed on Ammonius' instructions. Is this what Ammonius is warning us about?" Ammon ordered John to lead 36 guards and leave Igut first. They rode along the main road in the name of pursuing fugitive slaves. Of course, they were much faster than Moses and his people. They had already surpassed them the day before. John found Medanzo and Link in the middle of the night and told them about Ammon's latest plan. Besides letting these 2 outstanding disciples verify the power of origin that they had just learned, he also told them to pay attention to a few other things. Moses and his people had become fugitives. Pharaoh had ordered all the cities in the country to put them on the wanted list. The difficulties they would face along the way were not only limited to the difficulties they would face. The gods of Egypt were likely to use various means to stop them. The real gods would not directly attack Moses and the others, but they would use various means to create obstacles. To shake their faith, to make them feel fear and discouragement, to lose courage, confidence, and hope. If the Dushians no longer believed that they could succeed and gave up on the mission, then the Egyptian gods would have succeeded. Medanzo and Link were secretly trying to resolve these obstacles and encourage Moses and the others not to give up. If the gods' obstruction and intimidation did not succeed, they would probably send messengers to threaten Moses and the others. The messengers of the gods should also be the gods in the legend of Igut, but Ammon told Medanzo and Link that those messengers were not real gods who transcended eternal life. They were nothing more than masters of the secret of becoming gods like them and trained in the power of unity. In this case, Medanzo and Link needed to take action, but there was no need to fight to the death. They could make various agreements to hold them back and let Moses and the others pass safely. When the light appeared on the horizon, there was a faint morning mist floating in the forest. Moses gathered his people and walked to the river, and the mist slowly followed them. The rushing river was still red and exuded the smell of blood, but the morning mist floated out of the forest like a thin blanket on the river. Gradually, the white mist on the river became thicker and thicker, and under the cover of the morning mist in the forest, it turned into the shape of a pontoon bridge. Moses waved his staff and said, "This is the path that the gods have guided us to cross the river. As long as the faith in our hearts is firm, we can walk to the other side. Only one person can cross at a time. Everyone looked at the condensed mist, and many people did not dare to go over. How could they step on the mist? If they stepped on it, wouldn't they fall into the river? Just as Moses was about to go, a clansman said, "Moses, I know that the gods have given you strength, but we don't. How can we cross the water? Do you want to leave us?" Moses stopped and said, "Everyone can cross. Since you said so, I will be the last to cross. Who will go first?" His servant Joshua lifted the corner of his robe and was ready to cross the bridge. The youngest child of the clansmen, David, suddenly came out and said, "My faith in going home has never wavered. I will go first." Then he ran over. His father, Jonah, just shouted, "David, be careful." The child had already disappeared into the thick mist. Only one person could cross at a time. This was the order of the gods. Everyone waited anxiously. After a while, David's voice came from the other side, "I have crossed, it will be fine. This bridge is amazing, it is like stepping on the clouds." The people breathed a sigh of relief when they heard David's words. One by one, they crossed the magical bridge. Moses was the last to reach the other side. Everyone looked back. The sun was shining through the gaps in the treetops. The mist had dissipated, and the river was clear again. The people smiled. They had crossed the river. Link unfolded the crystal shuttle and spread it on the surface of the river to guide the Dushians across. The crystal shuttle could still change in such a way, which showed that his method of controlling the artifact had become more refined than before. Amon's new understanding of the power of inseparability was fundamentally to forget the concept of the so-called body arts or magic arts. To control the crystal shuttle, one had to achieve at least the 7th level. But Link realized that if the crystal shuttle was turned into a mist bridge, in fact, the 4th level was enough. It was not that the power was more powerful, but the way of using it was different. Madanzo stood guard at the side, in case of any accidents during the crossing. Only when everyone had crossed the river did the two quietly put away the shuttle and leave. Madanzo smiled at Link, "That boy named David is really good." He did not panic at all when he stepped on the transmogrified shuttle for the first time at such a young age. Although he was full of questions, his steps were very steady. His aptitude is rare. Moses awakened the power of two sides for the people. Why did he miss out? Link replied, "I also paid attention to this boy. He is still too young, only 14 this year." According to the tradition of Duk, one can only learn the skills of mining at the age of 16. It is also a good foundation for practicing the power of two sides. This boy has not learned it yet, so Moses did not awaken his power. "From what you said, you seem to be very interested in this boy." Madanzo nodded, "I am very optimistic about him. It is indeed not suitable for him to learn the skills of mining at such a young age. Without a mature bloodline, it is difficult to withstand the impact of the power. Only a few talented people are exceptions. Since Ammonius has imparted his latest insights to you and me, I also want to try taking in a disciple to awaken David's power. He has not learned any magic or body arts, and has no prejudices in his heart. It is suitable for him to start from scratch." Link glanced at him and said, "You really like to be in the limelight." Ammonius wanted John to try the awakening ceremony, starting with Miss Vi. "But you were the first to get the itch and chose this David." Madanzo said thoughtfully, "I have experienced all kinds of awakening ceremonies. The first was in the capital of Babylon, where I experienced the ceremony to awaken the bloodline of warriors. Later, in your tribe, Ammonius awakened the power of two sides for me. After saving Princess Sisela and returning to Babylon, Her Highness, in order to reward me, ordered people to hold a second awakening ceremony for me. There are so many complicated ceremonies, but Ammonius only came up with a name to include all of them. It is called the Awakening of Power." Link sighed, "Ammonius is really amazing, to be able to point out the origin. But the Awakening of Power is not easy to succeed. For those who do not have the aptitude, they can still use the original ceremonies to achieve limited achievements. Even if they know the secret of becoming a god, most people will not be able to become a god. It is just a matter of distance. But as long as one has worked hard in life, life is not a pity. Moses and the rest followed the wilderness of the Nile Valley, bypassing the main city of Bubas and entered the territory of Danis. Further ahead was the estuary of the Nile River. This river was divided into many thin streams that spread out in a fan shape, forming a delta that was flooded during the season. They walked along the wetlands of the triangle for a few more days, and when they were not far from the coastline, they turned east and continued walking. They did not encounter any more accidents along the way, and the tribesmen heaved a sigh of relief. The weather was relatively humid, and when they camped at night, Moses ordered the tribesmen to set up tents and be careful not to catch a cold. That night, when everyone was sleeping soundly, they suddenly heard a scream of horror, which was followed by a cacophony of screams. Everyone woke up and ran out of their tents in panic. It turned out that countless frogs had climbed ashore from the nearby streams and got into the tents, beds, utensils, and even people's clothes. How did these frogs appear? Even the few judges who were on guard at night did not notice. Everyone was awakened by the frogs and jumped out of their bedding in fear. Some people even took out a few frogs from their crotches and threw them out. The camp was a little quiet, and countless frogs began to croak. The croaking noise made people dizzy, and they could not even hear each other clearly. One or two frogs were not scary, but countless frogs appeared densely, jumping everywhere, and the croaking of the frogs echoed in the wilderness. This was a terrifying scene that made people's scalps tingle. Moses slammed his cane on the ground, and an invisible force drowned out the croaking of the frogs. He shouted to the tribesmen, "What are you panicking for? Even the frogs are like this. What will you do if you encounter a real enemy? Pack up and continue moving out." This section of the road was relatively wet and muddy. There were many small streams along the way, and there were large and small pools everywhere. No one knew where so many frogs came from, but they kept croaking loudly, making people feel uneasy. Moses had the 12 judges raise their iron staves and take turns to open the way, driving away the swarm of frogs in front of them. But every night when they were camping, frogs would constantly jump out of the trees and cracks in the rocks. These little things were slippery, and they would sneak into the cups they drank, the blankets they slept in, and the clothes they wore. It was simply impossible to guard against. The 12 judges tried their best to drive them away, but there were just too many frogs. Although they did not hurt anyone, they disturbed everyone and made it impossible for them to rest. After a few days, everyone was exhausted. This kind of torture was really unbearable. The further they went, the more the disturbance from the frogs became, as if it would never stop. The tribesmen were suffering unspeakably. Of course, Medanzo and Link also noticed, and the two secretly discussed what to do. Link said, "In the legends of Igut, there is a frog goddess called Hecate, who is said to be a servant of Seth. Could it be that she did it?" Chapter 172. 156 Frog Goddess Hecate. Link frowned. Her purpose is clear, that is to disturb Moses and the others. Frogs don't bite, but they can annoy people to death until they are exhausted and can't hold on any longer. Sooner or later, they will panic and stop moving forward. No one can withstand endless torture and wear down their courage and perseverance bit by bit. If they break down, Seth will have succeeded. Medanzo spat. What a ruthless method, driving so many frogs out to annoy me. I can't even find an opponent to fight. There are too many frogs, there's no end to them. Link said solemnly, "If Frog Goddess Hecate doesn't show up, we don't have to show up either. This is a test for Moses and the others, and they must overcome this difficulty. As long as they cross the Nile River and reach a dry area, Hecate naturally won't be able to drive so many frogs. At the current speed, I'm afraid it will take a few more days." Medanzo said, "This is a test of faith and will. It depends on how strong their will is and whether they can persist in this kind of environment. I found that David is really a good child, he eats and sleeps well. The calmer a person is, the less likely they are to be disturbed by this kind of torture. Link smiled. The frogs are helping you to test people. Are you going to guide that child in the next few days? Madanzo smiled. I've never eaten frogs since I was a child, but when I came to your tribe, I learned that frogs can also be eaten, and they are so delicious. Now I'm craving them again. Panic and unease gradually spread among the tribesmen, and the continuous torture caused them to fall into a trance. Some people said that this was a punishment from the gods of Igut, but where was their god, Allah? The 12 judges tried their best but could not completely drive away the ubiquitous frogs. It was a bit like the scene when Amon and Madanzo encountered scorpions in the desert. Many people could not walk anymore and said to Moses, "We are not complaining, most of us are strong, but we can't take it and can't rest. Is this the punishment from the gods of Igut? Why do they torture us like this? Take us away from the forest and those pools." Moses advised, "We can't leave the forest yet, or we'll be discovered by our pursuers." This is exactly what the evil god Igut wants to achieve. All of you are calling out to Allah, but have you ever thought about what you should do? Don't stop. Leave the delta wetlands as soon as possible. The longer you stay here, the more torture you'll suffer. Gather round me, all of you, and let me raise my staff to bless you, and wash away your weariness and restlessness. Moses and his people did not stop. Although they were exhausted, they still followed the path that God had pointed out. On this day, David was sleeping in the midst of the croaking of the frogs. Suddenly, he heard a voice in his mind, "David, child of Duk, the messenger of the gods is calling you. Please leave the tent quietly and go to the place where the frogs are the loudest. No one will find you." David was really brave. For the past few days, everyone had been panicking when they heard the croaking of the frogs, but he dared to enter the forest where the frogs were the loudest in the middle of the night. The judges on night watch were also tired and did not notice David sneaking out of the tent. David walked through the dense forest. The croaking of the frogs suddenly quieted down, as if they had retreated to a place far away. Then he saw a fire beside a stream, and a man sitting beside the fire. This person was wearing a cloak that covered his face. He was holding a thin and long golden weaving shuttle in his hand. A bunch of freshly washed and peeled frogs were skewered on the golden weaving shuttle. The frogs were being roasted on the fire with a sizzling sound. His other hand was sprinkling salt on them. The air was filled with the fragrance of humans. David was shocked and asked, "Who are you? Why are you roasting frogs? Can they be eaten?" Madanzo asked, "First tell me who you are and why you are here." David replied, "I am David Solomon, a warrior of the town of Duk. Under the guidance of our God, I have completed my vow to return to my hometown. The messenger of God Allah has summoned me." Madanzo stood up and said with a smile, "I am the messenger of God. These frogs have tortured you for so many days. Do you dare to eat them?" David knelt down and said, "As long as you eat them, I will eat them." Madanzo tore off a frog and ate it happily under the shadow of the cloak. Then he handed the golden weaving shuttle in his hand to David, "Child, are you hungry? The taste is very good." David reached out and took down a roasted frog. He gently bit off a piece and tasted it. Then he stuffed the whole string of frogs into his stomach and ate with relish. Madanzo looked at him with a smile. When he finished eating, he asked, "Is it delicious?" David nodded and said, "Delicious, very delicious." Madanzo asked again, "Are you still afraid of them?" David shook his head and said, "No, I have never been afraid." "Messenger of God, did you summon me here to treat me to such a delicious meal and tell me that I don't have to be afraid of frogs?" Madanzo smiled and said, "Yes, but I have something else to do. This is our little secret. Don't tell anyone else." From that day on, Madanzo awakened David's power, but he never revealed his face. He only said that he was the messenger of God Allah. David asked him what kind of power it was. Madanzo replied that it was the power of faith, which required people to practice with firm faith. David then asked Madanzo about the frogs. Madanzo explained, those are the messengers sent by the evil god Igut. They want to stop the Dushians and shake your faith. David pleaded, Messenger of God, could you please drive those frogs away? Madanzo shook his head and said, the frogs live in this wetland. You will encounter them when you pass by. This is a difficulty that you have to overcome. If the messenger of the evil god acts directly, the messenger of God will stop him. But you can't expect to get everything from God without paying anything. Including the power I taught you today, it is also given by God, but you can only practice on your own. The next day, when David returned to the camp, his father Jonah ran to him and hugged him, saying, Son, where have you been? Everyone is worried. If I don't see you soon, Lord Moses will send people to find you. David raised a branch in his hand, on which there was a string of cleaned frogs. He said, I'm going to find something to eat. Roast them on the fire and sprinkle some salt. They taste really good. The people around him said in horror, David, how can you eat such things? They are sent by the demons to torture us. Be careful or you will be poisoned. David smiled and said, I already ate them last night. They were delicious. What are you afraid of? Moses walked over and patted David's head, saying, You are very brave and did a good job. If no one wants to eat them, you can eat them yourself. After walking like this for another 5 days, the group finally left the edge of the wetland of the Nile River Triangle. In front of them were rolling dry hills with grass and shrubs, and the croaking of the frogs finally faded away. Link and Madanzo stood on a treetop and watched Moses and the others walk into the area where there were no frogs. Suddenly, they felt a powerful force behind them. Link whispered, Hecate has appeared, and she is in the jungle. Is she going to attack us directly? Madanzo pulled out the key of destiny from thin air, and with a wave of his hand, he put on the scorpion shell armor. He turned around and said with a cold face, My hands are also itching, I have been waiting impatiently for a long time. Link also turned around and quietly reminded, Be careful, this Hecate's stealth magic is better than ours, we have not been able to find his hiding place even after so many days. Madanzo sneered, Of course, there are frogs everywhere, he can completely hide his aura. I suspect that he is a mutant frog demon, just like Elmar, who is born with the ability to sneak around in the environment he grew up in. If Elmar hides in the swamp and hides his aura, it will be difficult for us to find him. But if he wants to attack us, the situation will be different. As he spoke, countless water droplets floated up from the leaves, the puddles, and the nearby streams into the air. The droplets were like transparent pearls that reflected a bright light under the sunlight. It was a beautiful sight. A person walked out from the grass, and from the looks of it, it was a young man. This person was wearing a green robe covered with dark brown stripes. His eyes were a little round and bulging, but he could be considered handsome. However, there were a few brownish-green stripes on his cheeks and forehead, as if they were painted with oil. They reflected a faint luster, appearing strange and mysterious. As soon as this person appeared, the floating water droplets began to glow, and gradually elongated in the air, turning into transparent arrows. Countless water arrows were ready to be fired, all aimed at Madanzo and Link. Madanzo pointed at the person with the key of destiny and asked, Is this Hecate? The newcomer was slightly startled. So you know me. Since you know it's me, why don't you put down your weapons and salute me? Madanzo narrowed his eyes and said, Why? Lord Frog Angel, you have been the one causing trouble for the past few days, right? What makes you think that we will put down our weapons and salute you? To be honest, we don't know you, and we don't want to know you. We just thought of you when we saw those frogs. Hecate also narrowed her eyes. Her pupils were also greenish-brown, like vertical slits on her eyeballs. You are indeed not ordinary mortals. Not only are you not panicking after seeing the legendary Hecate, you even dare to speak like this? Madanzo shrugged. I have seen those so-called gods who have transcended eternal life, but they are not my gods, let alone you. Who ordered you to come here, and why are you disturbing those suffering tribesmen? Hecate's figure was submerged in a sea of transparent water arrows. The arrows that filled the sky were filled with power, but in the end, they were not fired. She looked at Madanzo, then at Link, and shouted with slight surprise, "Are you the disciples of the Scorpion King Jirashui? No wonder you obtained the power bestowed by the gods. But this is the Igut, and I am the emissary of Seth, the King of Angels. How dare you stop me?" Link did not speak, but he was not idle either. At the same time that the water droplets in the forest turned into arrows, a bow floated in front of him. The bowstring was pulled and turned into a series of shadows, turning into many strings. The bow looked like a harp. Dozens of arrows flew out, densely packed on the bowstring. They were arrows made from the stinger of a giant mutant scorpion. He and Madanzo were also wearing scorpion shell armor, so it was no wonder that Hecate would misunderstand. Madanzo shook his head. "Whose emissary we are has nothing to do with you, and whose emissary you are also has nothing to do with us. Those poor people have not done anything wrong, and have never offended you, so why are you torturing them?" Hecate apparently misunderstood Madanzo's words as a tacit agreement, and showed a look of contempt. "The Scorpion King Jirashui himself has not yet obtained the qualification to join the Anunnaki divine clan, and it is even more impossible for you to follow him. A demigod exiled in the desert, who has no divine clan to rely on, sent an emissary here to make an enemy of me. Don't you think it's ridiculous?" Chapter 173. 157. Being a fraud. Link finally spoke, "We are not your enemy, but you are our enemy. We have our own god, and he is unique. Please do not say such blasphemous words in front of me. If you want to make a move, then please do it." Hecate looked at the key of destiny in Madanzo's hand, and then at Link's strange divine bow. The power of the key of destiny was needless to say. It was once Enkidu's god-slaying sword, but now it had become a golden shuttle that no craftsman in the world could forge. And Link's bow was once used by Amon. Later, when Amon obtained Gilgamesh's bow, he gave this famous battle bow to Link, and Link spent another 6 months refining it to make it even more magical. If they really fought, regardless of whether they could win or not, the price would not be small. Hecate blinked her big eyes and suddenly laughed. "Two emissaries, you are no match for me, but I don't want to be enemies with you. You have followed Girth to achieve what you have today, and you should understand the agreement between the gods. We can also make an agreement. I will complete my mission, and you will complete yours." Metatro nodded and asked, "What agreement?" Hecate replied, "Those people themselves are not guilty, but they wanted to escape from Igut, and the angel king Seth has decided to punish them. And for them, it is also a trial and tribulation that they have to go through. I will not directly harm them, but I will create all kinds of obstacles according to the orders of the angel king, and you can do your best to resolve them." Madanzo gave Link an inquiring look, and Link nodded and replied, "Okay, let's see what we can do." Hecate laughed again, "I wish you good luck. The Scorpion King Girth's temper is not very good, and if you can't complete your mission, you may end up worse than those miners. If you regret it, you can still come to me. Let me remind you, the angel king Seth did not only send me as an emissary, my mission has actually been completed, and there are others ahead of me." After she finished speaking, the countless water arrows turned back into water droplets, emitting a colorful glow under the sunlight. Countless interwoven rays of light covered Hecate's figure, and then the water droplets fell back down. The forest returned to normal, and Hecate disappeared, along with her powerful aura. Metatro looked at the place where he disappeared and snorted. "So his mission has already been completed, but he purposely appeared to scare us. After spouting so much nonsense, he actually wanted to take in disciples, but he took a fancy to us." Link laughed. "This person doesn't even understand the situation, and thinks that we were sent by the Scorpion King. No matter whose emissary we are, if we betray our mission because of a few words from him, how can we achieve greater?" Madanzo looked at the sky. He just wants to take in 2 powerful subordinates for himself. As for being able to join the Ennead and so on, those are all deceptive terms. It's just that I don't quite understand what he said. It seems like he's trying to be mysterious. Link thought for a moment. It doesn't matter whether you understand or not, it may not be something we can understand, and Ammonius will tell us sooner or later. Hecate said that there are still emissaries sent by Seth ahead of them, who knows what kind of people they will be. Medanzo shook the key of destiny. Who cares, the road is under Moses's feet, we'll see. Moses and the others finally got rid of the frogs and entered the hilly area between the coastline and the main city of Danis. The terrain was undulating, and there were lush thorns and trees as tall as 2 people. The strong miners pulled out their machetes to open a path, and although they did not walk too fast, they could finally sleep in peace. They walked like this for another 5 or 6 days, and many people's clothes were torn by the thorns, so they simply mended them and continued on their way. The trees were not tall, and the mountains were not steep, but they were so densely packed that there was no end in sight. That night, David heard Medanzo's summons again, and quietly ran to a valley to meet him. Medanzo had awakened the child's power, and had been teaching him all kinds of magic. On this day, when David closed his eyes and listened to Medanzo's teachings through message magic, he was a little restless, not because his mind was not strong enough, but because his body was always feeling troubled. His test had arrived, and it was the purity of the body, and only by passing this test could he master the 2nd level of achievement. During this process, the various hidden dangers and injuries in the body would act up, and of course, it would be very uncomfortable, but one had to persevere in their training in order to get through it. Medanzo was very pleased. David Solomon's aptitude was very good, he was very smart, and he mastered his power very quickly. Medanzo did not notice anything unusual at first, and only comforted the child to overcome all kinds of discomfort, but he suddenly felt that something was wrong today, because David could not help but scratch his body with his hands. He said, "Child, untie your clothes, let me take a closer look." David untied his clothes, and Medanzo was slightly surprised. "What's with these little red spots?" David explained with some embarrassment, "There are a lot of mosquitoes, fleas, and all kinds of small insects in the mountains. If I don't pay attention while walking or sleeping, I will be bitten." "It's not a problem, I will definitely focus on practicing meditation and not be distracted." After David left, Medanzo found Link and said, "There's a new situation, someone is driving the fleas and mosquitoes in the camp to bite Moses and the others. There are a lot of fleas in the mountains, it's normal to be bitten a few times if you don't pay attention, but there are too many red spots on David's body, obviously someone is playing tricks." Link spat, "This method is too sinister. Even we didn't notice. Moses and the others are strong, and they are very tired every day, so they don't feel much when they are bitten. But these little insects may spread a plague, and it will be too late by the time we react." Medanzo nodded, "We need to investigate and see if there are more fleas and mosquitoes around Moses's camp than in other places." The two quietly searched the wilderness, and found that where Moses and the others were camping, the number of mosquitoes and fleas was dozens of times more than in other places. These small insects, which were very common in the wilderness, were hiding under leaves, in the grass, and in the mud. If one did not deliberately search for them, it would be impossible to attract attention. Link said, "It could be another messenger sent by Seth, or it could be Hecate. I don't know the other methods of that frog demon, but he should have a way of controlling all kinds of insects. Aren't mosquitoes the frog's food?" Medanzo frowned, "The power I practice is more suitable for fighting, and my healing magic is not as good as yours. It seems that you will have to work harder this time." In the middle of the night, Moses, who was meditating, heard the voice of the divine messenger. Link told him, "The evil god of Igut has sent messengers to punish you, and they have used underhanded methods to make you suffer from countless mosquito and flea bites until you are infected with the plague. From today onwards, when you are camping, use magic to clean up the surrounding area, and take turns to cast healing magic on everyone, to prevent trouble before it happens." Moses replied, "Thank you for the reminder, divine messenger. I have also felt that there have been a lot of small insects these days, and although I am not afraid, many of my people have been bitten to no end. But if I cast healing magic, my magic power may be limited, and I am afraid I cannot completely stop the plague. Link said, "This is just the beginning, I want you to be prepared for anything." The disciples of God Allah have never been stingy with their magic power, and are even used to it. Go ahead and cast it, just be careful not to exhaust your power, I will help you in secret. There is also a kind of grass in the mountains, I will tell you what it looks like. Send your people to gather it, and order the 12 judges to dry it with fire magic. After burning it, it can drive away mosquitoes. Every day when you are camping, let the people on night duty put the hay in a circle and smoke it around the camp. Link was the tribe leader of the savages, and since he was a child, he knew that there were a few kinds of grass in the mountains that could smoke away mosquitoes when dried. He happened to find one here, and ordered Moses to send his people to collect it. From that day onwards, whenever it was time for Moses to rest, he would order the 6 judges to take turns to set up a magic formation, and he would hold the iron stick in his hand to preside over the formation, so that his people would gather around and bathe in the light falling from the sky. Every time Moses cast a spell, there would always be a mist floating over, making the light of the staff softer and denser. That was Link's help in secret. The messenger of the gods guided the people of Duk to get rid of the inconspicuous fleas and mosquitoes, but even a wise man would still make a mistake. When Madanzo and the others realized that something was wrong, it was a little too late. Although Moses and the others did not fall ill, the cows, horses, and donkeys they carried fell ill one after another and died one by one. Without animals to carry supplies, the people had to carry everything on their backs. Fortunately, a small part of the food they had carried along the way had been consumed, and they could barely carry all of it. But they had lost food that could be slaughtered at any time, and they were carrying heavier things on their backs, making it more difficult to walk. One day, they walked out of the dense forest and came to an open valley. There was a lake in front of them, and the shore of the lake was covered with soft grass. After a long journey, everyone was tired, so they unloaded their bags and lay down on the soft grass to rest. Moses also saw that everyone was very tired, so he told Joshua to let everyone eat more today. They soaked the bread in the soup until it was soft, and took out the pickled dried meat from their bags, cut it into slices, and roasted it on the stones. The smell of food permeated the shore of the lake, and the people showed a rare relaxed smile. They had not felt this comfortable for a long time. But suddenly, Moses frowned. He heard a buzzing sound. It turned out that a few flies flew out of the forest, and then more and more flies flew out and landed on the half-cooked pickled meat that was roasted on the hot stones. Then someone shouted, "What's so stinky?" The aroma of the pickled meat on the stones turned into a rancid smell, and they could only watch helplessly as they rotted. The rancid smell spread from everyone's body. They opened the bags and found that all the food inside had also rotted, even the dry bread and pickled meat were no exception. These food had been specially processed for long-term preservation, and would not rot even after a year. How could it suddenly spoil? Divine punishment, this was the punishment of the gods. Without food, they could not walk out of Igut. If they did not want to starve to death in the wilderness, they could only turn themselves into the city. Madanzo stood in the distant forest, his face livid, and said, "They actually used this method." Chapter 174. 158. I am a cat. When Moses and others embarked on a journey of suffering, what was Ammon, their god, doing? Ammon sent messengers to guide them on the way back to their hometown. After years of hard work and preparation, when the day really came, Ammon himself had no time to care. A cat, the cat upstream from the temple of Isis Square hundreds of years ago, was Ammon at the moment. It was not that Ammon went back to hundreds of years ago, nor did he become a cat. This was a very special state of meditation. Perhaps it was not appropriate to call it meditation. After experiencing the test of losing power and growing up again, if there was anything different, it was that the current Ammon was the self that he had been pursuing since he was born. Only by confirming this state could he reach a state where nothing existed, where his body and the world turned into nothingness. Schrödinger squatted in front of Ammon and unreservedly opened her spiritual world to Ammon. Ammon was experiencing Schrödinger's past. He was not simply seeing or hearing, but feeling everything as Schrödinger himself. During this process, he had to be absolutely calm and forget himself. There could not be a trace of disturbance in his mind. Otherwise, everything he experienced would become unreal. This was why Schrödinger waited until today. In this state, she was also unreservedly opening up all her secrets. Therefore, Schrödinger had to find someone she could absolutely trust. The people of Igut liked cats. This was a very old tradition. Cats came to Igut and solved the rat infestation in many places. They were regarded as the servants of the god of fertility. Therefore, around the temple of Isis Square, people had always had the habit of feeding cats. There were many stray cats living here, and Schrödinger was one of them. Cats had a wide variety of food. In addition to eating food from people, they also ran around to catch mice, birds, termites, grasshoppers, and other flying insects. It was very difficult for an ordinary person to imagine eating a live rat, but all the feelings were real. Under such circumstances, he was still able to not have a single thought and not have a single thought. This was the current Amon. This was a curious kitten. It was not afraid of humans, but it had a natural sense of alienation from humans. It would not get too close to them. Whenever various ceremonies were held in the square and people gathered, the cats would disappear without a trace. But one day, Schrödinger was chasing a flying beetle and forgot about its surroundings. When it came back to its senses, it found itself surrounded by feet. It was caught in the crowd and had nowhere to hide. It was frightened. A kitten wrapped in the surging crowd could be trampled to death. Just as it was overwhelmed with fear, it realized that everyone around it had stopped moving and knelt down in one direction. Ethereal singing came from the sky, and the temple bell rang melodiously. The cat looked up and saw the golden sky. There was a soft light sprinkling on its body. It was an indescribable magical feeling. The cat actually forgot its fear and stopped shivering. It was as if an invisible hand was caressing the depths of its soul. It just happened to be in time for the annual blessing of Isis. Perhaps it was a coincidence, or perhaps it was a sudden enlightenment, but at its most frightened moment, it experienced the blessing of Isis. At that moment, it seemed to vaguely understand something. Since then, the cat often slipped into the temple. Its simple intelligence could not make complex thoughts. It was only searching for the familiar feeling in its memory, in the singing of the priests, under the gaze of the statue. The cat's intuition was much sharper than that of humans. It remembered the singing and participated in many temple ceremonies. The priests thought that the kitten was very interesting. Instead of playing in the square, it was willing to come to the temple to watch the various ceremonies of the priests. It was like a small priest. After getting familiar with it, no one cared about it. People even gave it a name, Batet. Batet did not know how many awakening ceremonies it had experienced, including many second awakening ceremonies held by supreme mages for supreme warriors, as well as various blessings. Of course, it was not the protagonist of the ceremony, but a kitten standing at the feet of people watching the fun. The priests in the temple already knew the habits of the cat, so they did not banish it. Instead, they thought it was very interesting. A cat's lifespan was usually only a decade or so, but this kitten had lived for nearly 100 years. It did not know that it had such a long life, and all its actions were purely instinctive. The long years gradually gave it clear memories, which opened up the ability to think, and thinking made it spontaneously learn and understand. It did not know when it started, but when it lay on the bookshelf and watched the priests teach hieroglyphs, it suddenly realized that it had actually listened to them countless times, and understood the hieroglyphs word by word. These were not memories of Schrödinger, but traces imprinted in its soul. Amon unfolded his soul to open these imprints, and just like Schrödinger, he experienced all this for many years. When Schrödinger suddenly realized that he understood hieroglyphs, exactly one night had passed in the real world. This was a concept that was difficult for people to understand, as if it was a paradox of time. Amon had only sat for one night, but he had experienced many years. Time did not slow down, nor did it speed up, but the imprints in Schrödinger's soul had unfolded so much. If he did not have the achievements he had today, not only would it be difficult for him to accept it, but his consciousness might also be shattered into pieces. When the sky was just beginning to brighten, Aman opened his eyes. After experiencing this night, he felt that his soul had become both powerful and weak at the same time. Being powerful referred to being able to contain more in a single thought. Just like reading a book, a single glance could imprint the entire volume into one's mind, even clearer than an ordinary person studying it carefully. Being weak referred to having consumed too much energy, and having reached his limit. If he did not stop, Aman would very likely be completely lost in Schrödinger's imprints, and enter a deep state of coma. Aman exhaled deeply, and asked with a weary voice, "This is where you came from? You made me experience all this in order to undo the seal that imprisoned me?" Schrödinger shook his head. "No, this is only the beginning. I need you to clearly understand everything I've experienced, only then will you be able to find the seal that imprisoned me." Aman was a little surprised. "What seal? You don't even know. Then how do I undo it?" Schrödinger sighed. "It's in my imprints. When I unfolded my soul to you, my consciousness was stagnant, and I don't know exactly what you've experienced. Only in this way can you perceive it more clearly than I do." "What did you understand just now?" Aman smiled. "The me just now was you back then. After opening my eyes, I thought of a person." "Well, it can't be said to be a person, it should be said to be an ironback." Aman thought of Elmar, because Elmar had learned hieroglyphs not long ago. How could an ironback know how to write? In fact, Aman did not understand, he only let Link teach it. But now he was witnessing the entire process of a cat awakening its intelligence. There was a great coincidence that even the cat itself was unaware of, like the light in the sky suddenly illuminating something. Schrödinger's expression was a little startled. "So you've experienced so much? Then there's the real confusion. As a cat, I didn't understand what kind of existence I was. You need a good rest, and after you recover, go and experience it again." Aman rested for a whole day, and that night he still felt that he had not recovered. It was not that his magic power was exhausted, but a kind of tiredness made it difficult for him to accommodate the imprint in another soul. Schrödinger patiently waited for him for another 2 days, and on the third day he started again. When the cat realized that it could read hieroglyphs and even write the name, Batet, with its claws, its way of thinking changed, and its real confusion began. This cat did not know what kind of existence it was, and it was obviously different from other cats. When it woke up from its muddle-headed ignorance, it realized that the cats that had wandered with it in the temple square were long gone, and it did not know how many generations had passed, but it was still alive. Why was this, and what was life? This was the first question it thought about. A cat's eyes could adapt to the dark, and its body was much more flexible and agile than a human's. It had lived as long as a human's, so it began to wonder if it was a cat. If it was, what kind of cat was it? There was also a deeper question: what kind of cat did it want to be? Countless times in the quiet night when it looked up at the statue of the gods, the cat suddenly had an absurd idea in its heart. It wanted to be a cat like that. From that day on, its eyes could not only see everything in the dark, but it could also clearly feel the blood in its body when it closed its eyes. It had spontaneously mastered the divine art of meditation. A cat's body did not look like a human at all, but in terms of origin, it was almost no different from a human. Schrödinger often strolled in the temple square, and saw all kinds of people coming and going. One of them was itself, not a specific person, but an image formed by countless people. This image was called Batet, and it was what the priests called it. When a cat meditated, there was a strange situation that human practitioners could not experience. It really turned into the image of a human, and had that kind of body, hair, and skin. This was a person that only existed in the world of consciousness, and in the real world, it was still a cat. This person was growing, and it was practicing. This psychic cat had never used any divine art in the temple, and its practice was just a kind of reflection. In fact, from the day it had self-awareness, it was already stronger than a lion, but no one dared to fight it. Batet gradually became a mascot in the temple. It was regarded as a magical cat by the priests because it lived long enough, and it had been in the temple for many years. It was a symbol of the god's favor. The cat began its own practice, and it was very unique, different from everyone else in the temple. It could not have received formal education, and it did not have any prejudices in its heart. It just practiced whatever it thought of, and it did not have the concept of divine arts or physical arts. Inadvertently, it passed through many tests. Finally, one day, it decided to play a joke on a young priest, and suddenly used message magic. The young priest did not see a cat, but a woman called Batet. The second time the spiritual imprint was unfolded, and the time was much shorter than the last time. When Aman opened his eyes, he felt even more tired, because the content of the experience was too complex. At this time, Schrödinger was no longer an ignorant kitten. In many ways, this was the experience of a human, but much more complicated than that of an ordinary person. Aman experienced 10 years in one night. He was so tired that he could not even breathe. He sat there to recover for a long time before he said, "Schrödinger, you are very beautiful." Schrödinger's tone was a little embarrassed. "Are you talking about a cat or a person?" Aman smiled but did not answer. Schrödinger turned around and slipped out. This time, Aman rested for a full 5 days. He was in a trance, and he could not even tell whether he was a cat or a person. This kind of soul fusion was terrible. If he did not have a strong enough will, it would definitely cause a mental disorder. Aman was not yet 20 years old, but he had experienced hundreds of years as a cat. It was inevitable that he would be in a trance, but he could calm down again. He also completely understood how important the test he had just experienced was. Just like what Maria once asked him, "You were a passerby who almost fell to death by the Nile River, but later became a general who shocked the continent. May I ask, on the battlefield, are you still a passerby by the Nile River? When you returned with glory, you could not leave your territory because of your military power. In your territory, are you still a general on the battlefield? Now you are sitting in front of me with your head lowered. Are you still the innocent boy in Duk? If not, then who are you? If you are, then who is Aman?" Aman suddenly found that he was becoming stronger and stronger as he experienced Schrödinger's spiritual imprint. What he grew was not just pure strength, but also a kind of potential, or capacity of the soul. 5 days later, at midnight, Schrödinger once again opened his spiritual imprint. He looked up and saw the solemn and holy statue of the goddess Isis. It was the night when he used message magic to fool a young priest. When he walked past the main shrine, he suddenly felt a strange pressure. The eyes of the statue were staring at him. The cat had sensed it long ago, but today was different from the past. For some reason, the cat turned around and crouched down towards the statue, burying his furry head between his front paws as if he was praying. Then he heard a voice, "Batet, don't be afraid. I am Isis." Of course, the cat knew who Isis was. He had lived in the shrine for hundreds of years, and today he heard the voice of Isis in his mind. His soul was shrouded in a deep sense of awe, and he replied in his heart, "Great goddess, are you calling me?" The voice of Isis was solemn and gentle. "You naughty kitten, I have seen what you have done. It is a rare blessing in the world for you to have achieved such an achievement. I have decided to give you a chance. Please make a vow and accept the guidance of the Ennead, and I will tell you what the path you have been pursuing is." Chapter 175. 159 Endless Growth. Bastet did not have the slightest thought of refusing in front of Isis, and did not even have any doubt or hesitation. It made an oath and became a servant of the Ennead. The content of the oath was very complicated and difficult to express in words, and its meaning could only be clearly understood through the spiritual imprint. Batet would be introduced into a group of gods, or more precisely, a belief system, because it was not yet a god. There was an agreement among the gods that they would teach the method of becoming a god to those who had hopes of becoming a god, including creatures like Batet. However, this had to be approved by the divine system, and only gods who had truly transcended eternal life had the right to do so. People, like Batet who had mastered secrets, were not allowed to reveal them to the outside world without permission, and this was one of the oaths. Joining a divine clan meant that one must be loyal to the clan and could not betray it, because its power came from this. This kind of oath was not an empty oath made by mortals, but was left in the spiritual imprint, and there was no way to go back on it. There may also be conflicts or even wars between the gods of the same divine clan, which seemed to contradict the oath of joining the divine clan, but that was another situation, and Batet could not understand it at that time. There was an agreement between the gods, and there was also an agreement between the god systems. For example, there was such an agreement between the Ennead and the Anunnaki divine clan that when the people of the mortal world had a conflict in the name of the gods could not directly intervene, and could only change it through various tests or in the form of agreements with mortals. This agreement seemed to limit what the gods could do, but it was also a way for everyone to coexist, and for a reason that people did not understand, the gods seemed to be willing to do so. Of course, the members of the divine clan could not all be true gods who had transcended eternal life, and the gods would send messengers to do many things, such as servants like Batet. Isis did not choose Batet for no reason, because this cat already had the foundation of cultivation. According to the myths and legends, this cat was already a mutated cat demon, and was about to transform into a human form. Naturally, it was an excellent assistant, and introducing it into the divine clan could also strengthen the power of the divine clan. This foundation wasn't given to it by Isis. It had been cultivated naturally, and Isis had guided it to the right path. In this experience, Amon also learned the secret of becoming a god. This was the answer that Crazy, Ol and Bear had yearned for but could not get. As a cat, Batet did not pray to the gods, but was naturally led into the Ennead by Isis. However, this answer was no longer important to Amon. It was the origin power that he had comprehended. Back then, Crazy Ol discovered that the advancement of a warrior required various tests, and this was the most important breakthrough for him to solve the riddle. In fact, the secret that Isis had taught him was not about power itself, but the transcendence obtained through numerous trials. There were many people in the world who practiced body arts or divine arts. They may have achieved success, but the various trials they had experienced were unclear, and they may never reach the true realm of transcendence. Even if some people had achieved extremely high achievements, it was difficult for them to clearly summarize and experience it. After all, the path that everyone took was very different, and the common pattern was not so easy to find. People would inevitably pay the most attention to magical power, but often neglect the mystery of obtaining power. This was something that Amon had a deep understanding of, but after experiencing the past in Schrödinger's soul imprint, it was completely clear, because he had verified the cultivation of Batet in the past. Batet had made a vow that without the permission of the Ennead, she could not reveal the secret of becoming a god to others. This was the power that only the Lord God had. Isis's guidance of Batet, of course, was also nominally approved by the Lord God Horus, and it was impossible for Horus to disagree with Isis's decision. All those who received guidance must swear allegiance to this divine clan, and if there was an exception, Amon might be the only one. Amon learned all of Schrödinger's secrets from her soul imprint. It was difficult to say whether Schrödinger had violated the vow made by Batet in the past, but she did not reveal the secret of becoming a god to anyone. The answer that Crazy, Ol and Bear were desperately seeking was in the heart of the cat beside them. Amon had gone through such a difficult path, and Schrödinger had accompanied him all the time, giving him a lot of help and guidance, but not directly telling him what the secret was. It was not until Amon had cultivated the power of two sides to the 8th level and comprehended the origin of the power of the gods that Schrödinger opened the soul imprint to him. Amon already knew the real answer, and he did not receive guidance from any divine clan. One thing was very interesting. According to the agreement between the gods of the continent, Amon himself had actually played the role of a Lord God, because he had passed this power to his disciples John, Madanzo, and Link, and these disciples regarded him as the one and only God. Although Amon was not a real god who transcended eternal life, it was also the prototype of a new divine clan. Schrödinger did this because she had no other choice. If she could not unlock the seal of imprisonment, she would never be free. Why did the Batet of the past fall into the Schrödinger of today? On one hand, she had gained wisdom and obtained mystical powers. On the other hand, she did not lose her mind or fall, and received the guidance of Isis at the crucial moment. The so-called correct path might not be limited to just one, but ultimately all should lead to the realm of transcendence and eternal life. But the wrong path was hard to say. There were all sorts of strange things, and perhaps even the gods did not know where it led to. For example, the mutated Ironback King El-Mar, if it had been killed by Madanzo and Link back then, it would not be where it is today, and if Amon did not pass by, and it killed Madanzo and Link, no one knew what would have happened afterwards. Divine arts and body arts circulated in the world, especially divine arts which were so mystical. There were laws in the world that only hereditary nobles with the permission of the divine temples could learn divine arts and divine texts. But there would always be deviations when it was carried out by humans. Over thousands of years, there would inevitably be secret arts being passed down. Although it was by chance, it was inevitable after a long time, just like Bastet's situation. These people and creatures could become irritable and cruel. For example, if John had not met Amon, it would have been difficult for him to control his restless power. More dangerous than impulsive and irritable on the surface was their ruthlessness and cold-bloodedness. Some people would even use all kinds of evil methods to cultivate their power, and if it was not stopped, it would become a disaster. As a servant of the gods, Batet was often sent to fight against these demons. Sometimes the powerful demons in the wilderness would be directly beheaded by her, and sometimes she would secretly help the warriors of the human world. Batet made outstanding contributions to the messengers sent by the Ennead, and she advanced bravely all the way until one day she lost her power and was recalled to the temple of Isis. Amon had experienced this kind of test before, and at this time he saw the importance of the divine system. She needed guidance and protection. When she finally passed the test, Osiris appeared. Osiris directly walked out of his own statue, like a shadow in the night suddenly becoming alive. Batet hurriedly transformed into a human figure and prostrated herself, saying, "Great Osiris, you have appeared before me, do you have any instructions?" Osiris's voice seemed to come from the abyss. "Batet, I have seen your performance, you are the most outstanding of all the divine emissaries, I will give you the latest guidance." From that day on, Batet became an emissary of the underworld and carried out more dangerous tasks. And as a reward, Osiris taught her a strange magic that could restrain living souls. The so-called living soul could barely be described as the soul of a living creature. Fortunately, the power of Amon's soul was much stronger than it was a few months ago, and he could barely complete it in one go. Entering the meditation of Batet in the past was like a dream within a dream, and he had to wait for Batet to wake up before the current Amon could wake up. This experience could be described in 4 words, endless. It was no longer the experience of a cat, but the life course of all kinds of creatures, and the complex information was more than anyone's soul could bear. A person's life was limited, and so was their knowledge, but at this moment, all kinds of knowledge of different identities poured into the soul. Bastet's soul was almost drowned and lost in this river, unable to find the end, but in the end, she crossed it safely. She had experienced it all and forgotten it all, and the only way to reach the other side was to remain unmoved and not separate. Amon also did not move, and he was able to experience so many years as a cat without being in a trance, and his soul was clear and unhindered. After going through the test of endless growth, Schrödinger's power immediately became stronger and more magical. She really became a person, and did not use message magic or shape-shifting magic. At this time, Osiris told her that she was the most powerful of all the divine servants of the Ennead, second only to those gods who had truly transcended eternal life. When Amon opened his eyes in the meditative state this time, his whole body seemed to be imprisoned, and all his power was almost emptied, and it was a full day before he could speak. Schrödinger kept looking at him, and even rubbed her furry little head against him from time to time. When Amon finally spoke, he was the first to say, "I heard Osiris speak, but I never saw his face clearly. Schrödinger gently stroked the back of his hand with the small pat of her paw and said, "You do not really have that realm, you only experienced it in my spiritual imprint, so you can't see Osiris' face clearly, and you don't understand what kind of existence he is. I will not voluntarily reveal the secrets of the Ennead, and you can learn as much as you can from my experience. Osiris said that you are the most powerful of the divine servants, but Enkidu and I have fought before. Back then, you were no match for Enkidu. In terms of pure strength, you can't even defeat me now." Amon took a deep breath and moved his body with difficulty before saying, "Osiris said that you are the most powerful of the divine servants." Schrödinger shook his head and said, "How many strong beings like Enkidu are there in the world? He even injured Horus. Your strength is already very strong, even no less than mine at that time. But you still don't know the true magic of this realm. There are many people who have achieved the 9th level in the world who have not experienced the test of endless growth, and they will not understand it until the last moment." Amon did not quickly realize what magic Schrödinger was talking about, because this time he had to rest for a full month before he could continue. The next experience in the spiritual imprint contained too many unknowns for Amon. The 9th level supreme warriors or supreme mages of the human world may be able to fight with him in terms of strength, but there were many realms that he had not experienced. The transcendence of the gods did not depend solely on great strength. Schrödinger learned necromancy and passed the test of endless growth, and of course, he also had the special ability that Amon obtained from the underworld. Only then did Amon understand that it was just sensing people's thoughts. As long as one had achieved the 7th level, if they were prepared, even the gods could not catch them, and his special ability was not always effective. Amon was also relieved at the same time, which also meant that even the gods could not sense his thoughts. Chapter 176. The cat goddess Bastet now had the title, Cat Goddess. Although she was not yet a true god who transcended eternal life, she was already qualified to enjoy sacrifices in the shrine. The gods sent down an oracle, and the priests of the shrine built a statue for Batet next to the statue of Osiris, which was the image that Azeng saw. He had also built a similar statue in the manor. At this time, the magic of a higher realm could be seen. Batet had cultivated another independent consciousness, which was one with her origin and could attach to the statue. The statue itself naturally had no magic power, but it had a strange source of power, which was the sacrifices and prayers of people, the requests and wishes, and the casting of countless thoughts and beliefs. Intelligence has power, and thinking also requires energy. It can't see, but without this power, people can't do anything. For example, to drink a glass of water, the first thing to do was to have the thought of drinking water, and the body knew to pick up the cup. This was not the power that people usually understood. All that could be seen was the hand picking up the cup, and as for the origin behind it, it was another form. The incarnation that the statue attached to was a part of Batet, which was also related to Bastet's realm. The higher her realm was, the more statues she could attach to. On the other hand, the wider the source of this power she obtained, the stronger her soul would be. In a sense, the scope of her divine realm would be wider. Is this the so-called divine power source domain? Batet never had her own independent divine realm. She only enjoyed sacrifices as a follower of Osiris in the shrines of various places. In Schrödinger's spiritual imprint, Azeng had a preliminary understanding of the meaning of the divine realm. He had once sensed the thoughts of countless people in the underworld of the Anunnaki divine clan. At that time, Azeng could only keep his consciousness clear and undisturbed. Now he could finally confirm that those were the prayers of countless people in the divine realm to the queen of the underworld, including the thoughts of the souls in the underworld. The underworld of the Anunnaki divine clan was an independent divine realm belonging to Kela. There, she could have the power of those souls. No wonder Azeng released the souls of the Dushans, which made the queen of Kela furious. Judging from the undead magic that Azeng had mastered, the queen of Kela had used this magic to restrain the souls and build the underworld. What was so magical about this power? It could repair the soul. Can the soul be hurt? Ordinary people might not understand, but at A's level, it was very clear. Shin had been through hundreds of battles, but there was not a single scar on his body, but he had been injured. The most serious time was when he crossed the Euphrates River and encountered a monster. He used a scroll to kill the monster and then hurried on with his journey. He accidentally used up all his energy and almost couldn't move. It took him half a month to recover in Abel and Cain's manner. Without life force, a person would be nothing more than a block of cold blood. Without a soul, a person would be nothing more than a walking corpse. All injuries hurt one's life force and soul. Some could be seen, while some could only be felt. The simplest example was that when a person was extremely fatigued and his consciousness was hazy, he would not be able to exert his strength no matter how strong his body was. As a follower of the god of the underworld, Batet slew powerful demons and bound their souls. His own soul would also be injured in battle, but the incarnations attached to the statues of the gods could continuously absorb power to repair his soul. When she reached the 9th level and passed the true test, she would truly have the miracle of endless life. As long as she was not destroyed, her life seemed to be endless. When I experienced this part of the past in Bastet's spiritual imprint, he opened his eyes again and let out a long sigh. He felt much more relaxed at this moment than when he had left the state of meditation the last time. Schrödinger was still looking at him in the morning light. Reached out his hand and touched the cat's shoulder. The test of endless life is so important. It allows you to have a divine realm, and your life is almost endless. Is this immortality? What about the real gods? There was a trace of sadness in Schrödinger's eyes. Back then, I thought I could stand shoulder to shoulder with the gods. I had great power and endless life. Standing on the altar, I heard countless people calling for the great goddess Batet in their hearts. I suddenly thought of myself as a god. But later I found out that I wasn't. There is a price to pay for everything. You will understand once you continue to experience it. Schrödinger was never willing to talk about his past. After guessed her origin, he did not allow her to say the name, Batet. After experiencing her soul imprint for 200 years, already knew Schrödinger very well. She did not even need to use her special ability to understand Schrödinger's feelings. So she changed the topic and said, "You have passed the test of the endless cycle and have been allowed by the divine system to enjoy the right to accept the sacrifice in the divine temple. You can attach your incarnation to the statue. But from the divine arts you have learned, you don't actually need to reach this level to do something similar." Schrödinger nodded. "Your understanding is truly astonishing. No wonder you could explore this path without the guidance of the gods. Yes, a soul can attach itself to a statue of the gods and absorb its power. There is no need for the power to reach the 9th level. But there are 2 limitations. First, it can only attach itself to a specific statue, and cannot change its incarnation at will. As for those living souls that aren't strong enough, they often need external help to achieve this." Asked again, "Have you encountered such a situation before?" Schrödinger replied, "Of course I have. I have restrained some demons that attach themselves to the statues of the gods in remote temples. Compared to the living demons, the powerful souls that occasionally condense after a demon's death prefer to do it this way." Smiled bitterly. "Back then, you have also killed mages like me." Schrödinger also smiled bitterly. "Not mages like you, but supreme mages who are enemies of the shrines. Ordinary mages do not need the emissaries of the gods to act, and as long as the supreme mages do not become enemies of the shrines will not be willing to provoke them. The gods often send emissaries when they hear the prayers and summons of the shrines. There are 2 kinds of mages that I have killed. One is those who have gone astray and become a scourge to the people of the gods. The other is those who have openly become enemies of the gods and committed unforgivable crimes." Thought for a moment and said, "The latter situation, like Bear?" Schrödinger lowered his head and said, "Yes, if I was still the so-called goddess, I might have been sent to assist the pursuers of the shrines. But I was taken away by Bear. The Empire of Igut paid a heavy price to hunt down Bear. He died together with 3 supreme mages and 4 supreme warriors. If I were to accept such a task, it would usually be to guide those people on how to catch up with Bear and resist his power at the critical moment. In terms of pure combat power, the cat goddess Batet surpassed many powerful opponents that I had seen, but she was still not as good as Enkidu. If Batet and Enkidu fought one-on-one, it would be difficult for her to win, but she should be able to escape. If she was alone and encountered Enkidu and Gilgamesh, and Enkidu fought head-on while Gilgamesh used a soul-binding method to lock onto her, Batet could also be beheaded. This was how Humbaba died. When the gods of the divine clans dealt with powerful demons on earth, they usually sent down an oracle to let the shrines send masters to destroy them, and sometimes they would send emissaries to secretly assist. The shrines would also take the initiative to kill the so-called demons. Sometimes the opponent was too strong, they would pray to the gods, and when the gods heard the news, they would also send emissaries if necessary. Batet was once the most powerful of all the emissaries of the Ennead. Schrödinger didn't seem to want to talk about this topic anymore. He stood up and said to Ah, "You will soon learn what the judgment of fate and judgment of the end is in my spiritual imprint. My experience is a confirmation and help to your training, but it's not clear whether it's good or bad. The weather is good today, would you like to take a walk with me by the Nile River?" Ah also stood up and said, "It's been a few months, it's rare that you're in the mood to relax. Let's go for a walk by the Nile River and catch some fish for you." Schrödinger tilted his head and looked at Ah. "It's not that I'm in the mood, it's that you've experienced so much in my spiritual imprint, and you're still in the mood to catch fish for me. That's what's really rare." The Supreme General of the Empire had been living in seclusion for several months, and the farmers in the territory finally saw Ah coming out for a walk. He walked with his hands behind his back, walking out of the village built by Moses and the other slaves, passing through grassy slopes, fields, and river stalls. He didn't bring any servants with him, only a strolling cat. The wind was gentle and the sun was bright. The clouds on the horizon were like a flock of white lambs, and the Nile River flowed endlessly. Ah stood on a small boat with Schrödinger squatting at the bow. Without oars or sails, the boat gently floated out. It didn't drift with the current, but headed straight for the heart of the river. A group of huge crocodiles on the steep slope by the shore were startled. They swam into the river, showing their scaly backs beside the boat, and then disappeared into the deep water. Ah stopped the boat in the middle of the river, feeling the water flowing under his feet. With a wave of his hand, a few fish appeared out of thin air. Flames rose in the air, and all kinds of magic were used to clean the scales and internal organs of the fish. The seasoning was also sprinkled out of thin air, and in the blink of an eye, the fish were roasted fragrant. Then, he took out a golden plate and placed the fish in front of Schrödinger. Schrödinger sighed and said, "Ah, your cooking skills are getting better and better. This fish is so good." Ah smiled and said, "It's just the effort, because you like it." Schrödinger looked up at the sky with his cat eyes and said, "People often forget that the sky is so blue that it makes people's hearts beat." Ah also looked up at the sky and said, "You were very sad just now. Are you in a good mood now?" Schrödinger smiled and said, "It's been 100 years, and I've never been as sad as I am today, nor as happy as I am today." Seeing that Schrödinger was happy, Ah was also very happy. He wanted to continue to unfold Schrödinger's spiritual imprint that night. After 200 years, it was the most critical moment, but Schrödinger advised him to rest for a few more days, and he must be at the peak of his condition to experience the next part. Ah rested for 3 days, and at the same time, he practiced the power of the 8th level. All the skills he had learned before could be instantly used as one. He suddenly felt that after experiencing Schrödinger's past, he had also mastered all the skills before Schrödinger broke through the 9th level, except for transforming into a cat. After all, he was not Schrödinger. He felt that his condition was at an unprecedented peak, but Schrödinger advised him to practice for 2 more days, so he waited until the night after 5 days to start again. Batet transformed from a cat to a human, and from a human, she was revered as a god. She had endless life and could continuously absorb the power to repair the soul, and in her consciousness, she had already regarded herself as a god. She had also seen those gods who had truly transcended eternal life, and their means in the human world were no more than this, the only difference was the strength of their power. During this experience, I had a new understanding of the divine realm, and along with Bastet's spiritual imprint, he entered the residence of the Ennead. This was a wonderful world, above the fourth waterfall in the upper reaches of the Nile River. Most people who walked here could only see the waterfall and the mountains, and could not find anything unusual at all. But after opening a strange spatial door, there was another world hidden here, a world created by the gods in the human world. There were towering palaces and strange plants from all over the continent, and the messengers of the gods gathered here to practice. This wonderful world could protect them from outside interference, and the environment was more suitable for practicing all kinds of power. Batet had an independent small palace. It was called the Eru, first built by Ra, and later built by Isis and Seth. Every brick, every stone, every blade of grass and every tree was the most beautiful in the world, and the use of brilliant magic formations to gather the ubiquitous power between heaven and earth, creating a magical spatial world. But the real gods rarely appeared here, only Horus lived in the Eru all year round, and the messengers of the gods obeyed his orders. Also went to the underworld of the Ennead through Schrödinger's spiritual imprint. In the myths and legends, Osiris lived at the end of the Nile River, which also symbolized the end of people's lives, and the underworld was indeed on a beach at the mouth of the Nile River, which was flooded for half a year. The underworld was also invisible to ordinary people. It was like another strange spatial world, very similar to the underworld of the Anunnaki, but also slightly different, and As's experience was not very clear. The god Schrödinger had seen the most was of course Osiris, but in her spiritual imprint, she had never clearly seen the face of this god, he was like a shadow that was faintly discernible. Many years passed like this, and Schrödinger, who thought of herself as a god, gradually had new difficulties, and the seemingly endless life became a little boring. Year after year, like a monotonous river flowing through the same section, the people of the world were constantly changing, but life was always familiar. Is that what I am, she thought to herself, a god? From a cat to a goddess, was this what she was after? I have witnessed too much, but why should I witness it? Just when her unwavering faith for 300 years was in trouble, the real test came. At that time, Batet was in the underworld, and a strange power ignored the barrier of the underworld and directly pulled her out, revealing her on a desolate beach. Schrödinger thought that she had encountered a powerful enemy, probably an attack from a foreign god. The underworld was built by a magical space, so who could directly pull her out of the underworld? The enemy was unimaginably powerful. She looked up and saw a gray vortex in the sky, as if it was tearing the world apart and leading to an endless unknown abyss. She donned her battle armor and picked up her weapon, only to be struck by a bolt of black lightning. Not only did the lightning strike her weapon, it also struck her soul. It was as though the sun had suddenly lit up in the darkness. She finally understood what she was facing. Just like Azeng had witnessed the encounter of Enkidu, Batet had also experienced the battle of the invisible opponent. All the attacks seemed familiar, hidden in the black lightning, and contained all the injuries suffered by the enemies she had killed in her life. She had no way to avoid it, she could only face it, just like the test of fate. According to the understanding of ordinary people, defeating a person did not only depend on strength, but also on the timing and position of the attack. For example, a heavy blow might not be able to injure a Hercules, but a light stab at a vital point would be able to take the opponent's life. These were all techniques in combat. But the test of fate did not include such techniques, it was just the power to inflict damage. With Bastet's achievements at that time, she could already change her body, so there were no vital points to speak of. But the power of the black lightning was not limited to just that, it also attacked her soul. All the resentment of the world towards Batet erupted. Bast finally understood one thing. The gratitude she received from the altar and the kindness of her prayers could counteract this resentment. Otherwise, the first strike of the black lightning would have shattered her soul. This was like the judgment of the end of the world. There was no enemy, it was the reflection of all her actions. Batet finally felt truly weak, she was far from being as strong as she thought. The valiant demon body that had cultivated for 300 years was destroyed, the incarnations that had attached themselves to the shrines had all disappeared. Her life was over, her soul was severely injured, and she had lost all her strength, but it was not destroyed. When the black vortex disappeared, her final realization was that she was different from the souls that she had been bound to. She could attach herself to a blank life, combining her soul and life force. This was a choice made in a single thought. She wished that she was still a cat. 300 years of cultivation, all the achievements she had, in the end, all she got was a chance to make a choice. At this moment, her soul was suddenly intercepted by a mysterious power, as if time had stopped for an eternity. This was necromancy divine art, and it was a necromancy divine art that could only be performed by real gods. The one who acted was Osiris, the god of the underworld. It was as if his soul had fused with hers, giving Batet 3 choices. Chapter 177. 100 Years of Solitude. The first option was to stay. At that time, Batet was in a pure soul state, sober as never before, but she could not stay in the world on her own. The all-powerful Osiris could use the necromancy magic that only gods could master to keep her in the underworld and use the power of the underworld to repair her soul. Once again, she could attach herself to the statues everywhere. Perhaps she could reform her body and one day become a true god who transcends eternal life. This seemed to be the best choice. She was still the goddess Batet, the underworld, and had the hope of transcending eternal life. The second option was to forget. The imprint of the soul was the soul itself, and it could not be forgotten just because she said so. Osiris asked Batet to unfold the imprint to him, just as Schrödinger did to Aa today, saying the name and the real language. But Osiris did not do it just for the experience. He had the means to integrate these imprints into his soul, so Batet would no longer exist. This seemed to be the worst choice, which meant the end of everything. 300 years of cultivation would eventually disappear, and the imprint would be left to Osiris. The third option was to refuse, because the first 2 options required Bastet's own consent, otherwise Osiris would not be able to stop her. Batet could pretend that Osiris had never appeared at this moment, and still combine her soul with her new life, becoming a cat according to her wishes. This was the only thing she could do in the end after 300 years of cultivation. These 3 options sounded complicated, but there was no concept of time. It was just a moment when the soul became sober. Once Batet made a decision, everything was over. Finally understood what, the test of fate, the judgment of the end of days, was. After leaving this part of Schrödinger's imprint, he did not open his eyes. Instead, he sat for a whole day before he barely recovered. Although he was not the one who experienced the final test, he was also there. Aa's soul was injured, and it was not something that could be repaired in a day or 2. The place where he was in was the village built by Moses and the others, like a shaped duk town, with a shrine in the center of 2 neat rows of stone houses, and a square in front of the shrine. When Aa opened Schrödinger's soul imprint, he was sitting in front of the altar in the temple. This temple was built by Moses and others for their god, Allah. Moses had never seen Allah's face, and Allah was the only God, so Moses was not allowed to build a statue like other temples, so there was only one symbol on the altar, the cross of light. The cross was divided into 4 parts, top, bottom, left, and right. The top, left, and right sides were equal in length, while the bottom side was twice the length of the other 3 sides. At the center of the cross, there was a sun-shaped ring emitting light. Besides, being a lonely soul in the underworld has actually become the source of Osiris' power. In a sense, Batet has always been a tool of the gods. She has slain too many powerful demons, so much so that when the final test came, even her powerful demon body that had been practicing for 300 years could not bear it. Those were all tasks that she had accepted from the gods to complete. On the other hand, the gods also allowed her to enjoy the sacrifices in the temple. The prayers and faith of countless people offset most of the impact of the resentment of the judgment of the end, so that she could retain her soul. Asked again, when you came back to your senses, you were no longer willing to become a tool of Osiris and the Ennead. Did you ever resent them? Schrödinger shook his head and said, No, I don't resent them. I'm just a cat who was lucky enough to gain wisdom. Without the guidance of Isis, I don't know what kind of fate I would have. It's too difficult to find the right path among the thousands of wrong paths, and it's more likely that I would end up like those demons I killed. I was taken into the Ennead, gained great power, and became a goddess on the altar. With 300 years, I'm already a lucky cat, and I shouldn't complain about anything. What I did was what I was willing to do, and I've borne the consequences, that's all. The gods told you everything, but did not tell you about the final test. Do you know why? Schrödinger, when I finally understood, I did not resent Osiris. He never told me, of course, there was a reason. If I had known what the final end of this path was a long time ago, I was likely to shrink back, and I would not have been able to pass all the previous tests, and I would not have been able to reach that step at all. Although the test was terrible, one must also be qualified to face it, and the arrival of the test is a symbol of achievement. But I also did not resent Osiris. If I had guessed from the heart, I would not have achieved that kind of achievement, and I would have been of no use to him. The gods need powerful and courageous emissaries to complete all kinds of difficult and dangerous tasks. No god will tell this secret to the recipient in advance, and will only make all kinds of arrangements and agreements. Suddenly thought of something, looked down at Schrödinger and said, Zeni once reminded me of 3 things, it seems to be related to the final test. Did you tell Bear? Schrödinger looked down at the soil at his feet. I was the one who reminded Bear, but it may not be all good intentions. I once said that knowing this secret is not good or bad for you. What will you do? Smiled, nothing much, there's no difference between knowing and not knowing. In fact, I have also reminded my disciple, but some things are like fate, and you have to face it. A group of ants crawled past Schrödinger's feet, and the cat seemed to be talking to himself. It's easy to say, but it's also the hope of reaching the end of human achievement. Can you really do it? Sighed softly, I don't know, but since I said so, let's verify it. A month later, once again opened Schrödinger's spiritual imprint. This was the last time. It felt like reincarnation, and Schrödinger became a newborn cat again. It finally opened its light blue and pink eyelids, looking at the strange and unknown world. At this moment, the cat was still at a loss, and could not even struggle to stand, and did not know who it was, but its eyes were extraordinarily clear. As it slowly grew up, it gradually showed a different kind of magic. It could recognize many things around it, although it had never seen them before. It naturally knew what they were and what they were used for, which made it instinctively avoid a lot of harm. The survival rate of kittens in the wild was very low, and at least half of the kittens born in the year would freeze to death in the first cold wave of winter. This was the law of nature. The few lucky ones that survived had to face predation from wild beasts, the difficulty of finding food, and all kinds of unpredictable injuries. Schrödinger knew how to make its own nest from the time it was a toddler. It brought all kinds of things that could keep it warm, and looked for a safe place to shelter from the rain. After the first winter, it felt more and more familiar with many things in the world. Finally, one day, it followed a cat from a secluded street corner to the square in front of the temple of Isis, and suddenly realized that it had been to this place before. This was Bastet's achievement. She could bring her memories back to life, but at the beginning, this memory was very vague, and needed to be awakened bit by bit. The reason was very simple. The body and mind were one, and the soul was limited by life. A kitten's brain did not have the ability to think or recall so much complex information. It could only understand what it could understand at that time. In fact, Bastet did not die, but continued in such a situation, and had another chance to start over. But this did not mean that it could restore its past achievements. Cats were weak, and a big dog could kill it before it had time to cultivate its strength. A stray cat that could grow to 2 years old was already considered lucky among its kind. Its memories gradually became clearer as it grew up, and it found its way back from the shadow of déjà vu. It once again opened its spiritual wisdom, and if it was lucky enough, it might eventually embark on the path to the gods again. But if it lost the protection and support of the divine clan, the difficulty would be unimaginable. Shortly after it opened its spiritual wisdom, Osiris appeared again. One day, it was dozing off under the wall outside the temple, and the surrounding cats suddenly woke up and fled. Schrödinger opened its eyes and looked up to see a god in the shadow, and suddenly recognized it. Osiris said, "Batet, welcome back." It was Osiris who awakened its soul in advance, and used magic to tell it all its past experiences. When it was finally able to cultivate again, Osiris found it again and asked, "Batet, you did not die, but you were reborn in another way. I have been looking forward to your recovery, and your experiences have allowed you to start over again. Compared to the countless strong people in history who have fallen in the test, you are so lucky. As long as you unfold your spiritual imprint to me, you will still be a member of the Ennead." However, Schrödinger replied, "Great god of the underworld, I want to make a new choice, and I don't want to have anything to do with the Ennead anymore." Osiris said, "This is not a choice you can make. The guidance of the Ennead has made you a magical cat, and you cannot violate the oath you made back then. If you give up your mission, it is tantamount to giving up your own power and path." At first, Schrödinger did not quite understand what Osiris meant by this, but later, Schrödinger began to cultivate, and it took many years to break through the many tests, but its power never recovered. But this did not prevent Schrödinger from continuing to cultivate. The realm it was trying to verify was not hindered, it just did not need to use that power, and it passed the test of endless arising and ceasing cycle. It became a cat with its soul imprisoned, and it had always been a cat. Did Osiris imprison its power? So that it would always have the body of a cat. This kind of imprisonment had been loosened once, and Schrödinger was a cat with the 9th level of the power of origin, and it could occasionally gather its power to do something, but it was very taxing on its body. Later, Baal came to the temple of Isis and found a cat peeping at the ancient books in the archives, and Schrödinger also tried to find a way to lift the imprisonment of its soul from various records. Baal was surprised to find that the cat could not be detected by detection magic, which was almost a stealth skill that only gods had, so he conveniently stole the cat, wanting to know its secret. But Schrödinger only gave Baal 3 reminders. The genius Baal guessed that Schrödinger might be a sealed god, and once said, "If I can find a way to unlock your seal, you will tell me your secret." The sealing magic in the human world is nothing more than the transformation of brilliant message magic, and I am the most brilliant message magic master today. Already knew what happened next. Baal fled to the deep mountains of the Euphrates Valley, and at the last moment, he used the magic bone to throw Schrödinger from the air. Schrödinger landed safely, but when the bone was put away, it fell into a pool of water. Schrödinger went to the town of Duk with Baal's last message to find Crazy Ol, and waited until A showed up. From beginning to end, a long experience of 400 years, A returned as a bystander to the town of Duk where he grew up. He saw himself as a baby, and also saw his mother who had died when he was a child. In the spiritual imprint, A experienced everything as Schrödinger, but he saw himself in this memory, which was an indescribable feeling. He finally moved, and as soon as the thought occurred, it could no longer stay in the spiritual imprint of Schrödinger. Everything was over. When he opened his eyes, it was not yet dawn. In the darkness, the cat's eyes shone like jewels. Schrödinger looked at him expectantly, but asked in a worried tone, "What's wrong with you? You didn't finish the experience?" A said in a low voice, "Yes, how did you know? When I unfolded the spiritual imprint, weren't you in a state of ignorance?" Schrödinger jumped on his back, buried his head in his arms and said, "Because your eyes are full of tears." A reached out and hugged Schrödinger in front of his chest, "I'm so sorry. I was moved, because I saw my mother. It was the first time I saw her face clearly. I was too young when she passed away. Thank you so much." Schrödinger's voice was somewhat distant, murmuring in front of Ah, "Why are you saying sorry? The one who should be saying thank you is me. It's already a miracle that you could go through it until now. Even during the judgment day, you didn't have any thoughts. You didn't hesitate to endure 400 years of loneliness, just to help me. It's normal that you didn't persist to the end, because the final imprint was mostly a bystander looking at your own experience. You experienced the endless cycle of life and death in my spiritual imprint, but it was not your own test. You still don't have that kind of realm. Only when you break through to the 9th level in the future will you be able to verify it." Ah held Schrödinger in his arms and said softly, "You have something to ask me, why don't you speak?" Schrödinger buried his head in the crook of his arm. "You know my experience for the past 400 years better than I do. Did you find the seal that imprisoned my soul?" Ah said apologetically, "I might have found some traces, but it's not very clear. Can you give me a few more days? I'm going to meditate in seclusion. I can't see anyone for the time being, including you." Schrödinger raised his head. "I understand. You want to verify it in your cultivation. Thank you for your painstaking efforts. I'll wait for you." The Supreme General closed his door and ordered that no one should disturb him. He meditated in silence, experiencing and reflecting on everything. Half a month had passed while the Nile River flowed. Ah, who did not speak or move, had been meditating in solitude for 100 years. He ordered his servants not to disturb him, but a messenger came from the distant Hittite kingdom. Ah had no choice but to come out of his room to personally receive the messenger. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.